Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing, but his gaze stopped when it landed at the sharp edge. He saw a faint fluorescence on the blade of Guan's Masamune. Even in the dark, the blade could be seen clearly, and there was even a chill that struck the soul. Gawain had an inexplicable intuition. At this moment, the sharp blade wrapped in fluorescent light seems to be able to cut off everything. This is a direct increase in the power of the slash. Gawain took out an ordinary sword and gently cut it with Guan's Masamune, which had the extreme force attached to it. Whoosh! The blade cut through the ordinary sword in half as if it was sliding across the butter. There was no feeling of obstruction at all. Does it really increase the power of the slash? Gawain was stunned for a moment, then he was ecstatic. He opened the window and left immediately. A few minutes later, from the mountain behind Pala Island, flying slashes shot out one after another. Then it swept across the distant sea and flew to the end of the sight. The roar resounded through the sky, and several mountain peaks were cut off, with dense cut marks stretching for hundreds of meters. East blew. In the waters near Raven Harbor, the wind and waves gradually rose, and in the howling wind, a ship broke through the waves. Labu, how long will it take? A tall and thin pirate who looked like a cat sat on the deck, frowning and looking at the sea in the distance. Latch, who was short and fat like a fat cat, looked down at the chart, took out a pointer from his pocket, checked it carefully, and said, "It's less than 10 nautical miles to Raven Harbor. We should be able to reach Raven Harbor before the storm arrives. If all goes well, we'll be able to see the devil fruit the captain wants tonight." As he spoke, Labu glanced at the wound on the tall and thin pirate's body, and a trace of solemnity appeared in his eyes. How could that smoking man hurt you to this extent? Even in the weakest East Blue, are there people with logia fruit? Latch's face darkened, and his tone was filled with resentment. Logia fruit is secondary. The key is that his weapon is mixed with sea prism stone. Otherwise, how could I lose? Labu nodded and said, "As long as it doesn't affect this operation, it's fine." In addition, according to the information provided by Hanafuda-sama, Raven Harbor has a close connection with another pirate. Who? Labu explained, "The White Knight pirate, their captain, has a bounty of 85 million belly, the highest bounty in the East Blue. It is a force that has suddenly risen in recent months. Judging from the trend, it should be planning to enter the Grand Line." Latch smirked and said disdainfully, "Coming from the weakest sea, they have never experienced the brutal fight on the Grand Line. Even if he has a high bounty, it is just for show. It's not like we haven't worked together to capture the heads of pirates with bounties over 100 million. Besides, now that we have gained new power, we are much stronger than before." As he spoke, Latch slightly arched his back, and in a few seconds, he turned into a giant cat that stood upright with dark spots all over its body. This posture looks like that of a leopard, revealing the ferocity of a carnivore. He looked at the sharp claws on his fingertips, his eyes revealing his obsession with power. This is the truth of this sea. Strength is everything. Labu glanced at him, a smile on his face. "That's true, but we still have to follow the mission." Bang! Labu's voice was interrupted by a sudden gunshot. Latch, who was standing in front of him, had his neck tilted back, white smoke coming out from between his lips and teeth, and a black bullet was tightly clenched in his ferocious, sharp teeth. Puff! Latch spat out the bullet and looked around, but all he saw was the endless sea. For a moment, Latch couldn't help but feel a little confused and said angrily, "Who is it?" The pirates on the ship instantly became alert and looked for cover everywhere. The lookout stood on the mast and looked around, but in the end, he saw nothing and could only say anxiously, "Latch-sama, no suspicious ships have been spotted in the nearby waters. Even the nearest island is 10 kilometers away. Are you kidding me? Can he hide in the sea and shoot?" Chapter 89, Sniper in Raven Harbor. On the top floor of the city lord's mansion, a man over 3 meters tall and wearing a black cloak slowly put down the exaggerated gun in his hand and frowned slightly. "Ah. Is this the fate of that bullet?" While the man was speaking, several guards came up and said respectfully, "Augur-sama, is it resolved?" "What? Of course not." The man drooped his eyelids, glanced at the 2 guards, and said calmly, "I'd like to tell your lord that the opponents are far more troublesome than expected. If we are not mistaken, one of the pirates should be a zone fruit user. Looking at their route, they should be heading here." "A devil fruit user?" Several guards were stunned. Then, they remembered the powerful abilities that Lord Gaza gained after reading the devil fruit. For a moment, fear appeared on the faces of the guards. Even you can't handle it. No, I mean. It costs extra money. A few minutes later, Gaza heard what Van Augur said, and even with her temper, she couldn't hold back and exploded on the spot. Money. 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 I've employed him for less than half a month, and he's already raised the price several times? He's really taking advantage of me. After letting out her anger, Gaza slowly calmed down. In the previous war, most of the guards of Raven Harbor were killed or wounded, and they almost completely lost their combat effectiveness. The White Knight pirate can be relied upon for protection at sea, but these guards still have to be relied upon to maintain basic order in the harbor. So naturally, Gaza started a new round of conscription, and it was at that time that Van Augur was discovered. With his superb marksmanship, he can hit targets every time, even from thousands of meters away. Such a sharpshooter is hard currency wherever he is. Therefore, even though the price was a bit high, Gaza accepted it reluctantly. But in this situation, does this bastard really think of herself as an ATM? Miss Jasmine reminded from the side, the other party was able to bypass the surveillance route set up by White Knight Pirate and advance all the way here. I'm afraid their strength is not that simple. Van Augur may also be reminding you. Gaza took a deep breath. Her complexion returned to normal, and she began to make arrangements. Pala Island is a bit far from here. Mr. Galvin may not be able to get here in a short time. Let's notify the Nayab brothers first. Also, alert the guards in the harbor. Once the enemy enters the attack range, open fire immediately. Yes. When Gaza's orders spread in Raven Harbor, a pirate ship with a lizard skull flag slowly came into view on the distant sea level. The guards in the harbor started a round of artillery fire without any explanation. Boom. 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 Red meteors fell from the sky, and several shells directly hit the deck, but they only left a trace of black marks on the ship. The guards in the harbor finally realized at this moment that these weak shells were simply unable to resist the invasion of the pirates. A few minutes later, two figures jumped up from the deck of the pirate ship, crossed a distance of nearly 100 meters, and landed steadily in the harbor. Boom. The powerful impact completely cracked the floor, and spiderweb-like cracks spread several meters in all directions. Everyone in the harbor scattered instantly. Only a few guards bravely stayed where they were, watching the scene in front of them with trembling eyes. But when the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, what appeared before everyone's eyes were two monsters that looked like both humans and cats. Lion and cheetah? As the guards were puzzled, Latch, who had transformed into a human beast form, raised a sinister smile. It's an ocelot and a Maine Coon. After saying that, Latch's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. The next moment, a scream was heard from the crowd. When everyone looked back, they were shocked to find that a guard had been ripped open by Latch's sharp claws. After struggling weakly for a few times, he breathed his last. Latch licked the blood from his fingertips, his eyes ferocious and terrifying. The sweetness is mixed with a hint of iron. It's such an intoxicating smell. The guards were frightened out of their wits on the spot. Some of them even felt a warmth between their legs. Even though their bodies were shaking uncontrollably, they still held their weapons tightly in their hands and faced the enemy in front of them. It's because there are people they want to protect in the harbor behind them. Seeing this, Latch's grim smile widened. He arched his back slightly like a cat and rushed out like lightning but stopped in the next moment. Bang! A bullet passed accurately in front of Latch and penetrated the wall, just a few millimeters away from hitting his chest. Latch turned his head and saw only a series of transparent holes. Only then did he realize that this bullet had completely penetrated an entire row of walls. If it fell on him, even with the ability of the zone fruit, he is afraid it would tear off a large piece of flesh. Interesting. Latch licked his lips and turned to look at where the bullet came from and saw a black figure jumping down from a tall building. It seems that he was the one who attacked me before. Latch waved to Labu beside him. I'm going to chase the sniper. I'll leave these small fries in the harbor to you. After saying this, without waiting for Labu to react, Latch turned into an ocelot, took a step forward, and galloped towards Van Augur in the distance. What a bloodthirsty fellow. Labu shook his head, then looked at the guards who were gradually gathering around him, with a grim smile on his face, and said, Can you tell me where that woman named Gaza is? She stole our thing, a very important thing. The guards were silent for a while. Although they were afraid, they held their weapons tightly and did not retreat. Many of them are survivors of the previous battle and have long regarded Gaza as the person they respect the most. How could they retreat at this moment? Is that so? That's such a pity. As Labu's voice fell, the pirate ship in the distance finally arrived at the harbor. Hundreds of people jumped off the deck and rushed into the crowd. A fight broke out in an instant when they met. Amidst the flash of swords and sabers, Lebu fought off several guards who blocked his way and slowly walked deeper. With Maine Coon's eyesight, he could clearly see that a beautiful woman was hurrying here with two pirates dressed like cats. Look, isn't the target coming? Nightfall. A thin layer of fog gradually gathered on Pala Island. There is a chill in the air. Gawain, however, sat at his desk with a gloomy face, holding the receiver of the Den Den Mushi in one hand and listening to the intermittent voice from the other end. You mean a group of blind pirates attacked Raven Harbor, injured the Nayab brothers and Django, and even stole Gaza and the devil fruit she was going to give me? At this moment, anyone could hear the uncontrollable rage in Gawain's voice, but the man on the other end of the Den Den Mushi seemed to be completely unaware of it and just said calmly, "Ah, that's about it. This is fate. By the way, if I die, could you please help me send the money from this mission back to my hometown?" Gawain was slightly stunned and asked, "May I have your name?" "Augur." Van Augur added, "Oh, remember, it's 3 times, no, 5 times the reward." Chapter 90, A Man Who Can Walk Out of the 50-meter Track. I didn't expect he was such a money grubber. Gawain's mouth twitched. Through this name, he was basically certain that the man he was talking to at this moment was the captain of the 3rd ship under Blackbeard in the manga. The supersonic, Van Augur. In terms of sniping ability alone, Van Augur is definitely at the top of the pyramid. This can be clearly seen from the later battle against Cracker. Although the main force in that battle was the former Marine Admiral Aokiji, what was truly outrageous was the scene where Van Augur shot down a biscuit warriors with 1 shot. You know, that thing can withstand an attack from Luffy, who's in 4th gear, in other words. The destructive power displayed by Van Augur in that battle was equivalent to killing a Vice Admiral with 1 shot. Even Gawain, at this moment, could only run as far as possible when he faced Van Augur in that time. From this point of view, Van Augur's potential in combat is at least silver, and even gold is not impossible. It would be a lie for Gawain to say that he was not tempted. Besides, recruiting an excellent sniper was already part of his plan, and Van Augur was qualified from every angle. "Hey, don't die." "Allah Allah." Van Augur smiled bitterly, "This request is a bit difficult for me. But if the reward is sufficient, I can." Gawain's eyelids jumped. "Then you'd better die." Hey, you're saying this to a wounded person. Isn't that a bit too much, no matter how you think about it?" Van Augur's voice became visibly lower. Just as he was about to say something else, his face turned red, and he opened his mouth and coughed up a mouthful of blood. Click. He couldn't help but look at his chest. 2 crisscross scratches almost tripped him apart. Not only the flesh and blood on the surface but also the bones in the chest and even the internal organs were injured. At this moment, he was already at the end of his strength. "Is this my fate? It's so ugly." As he spoke, Van Augur felt dizzy, which was a symptom caused by excessive bleeding. With his last bit of strength, he reminded, they left after getting what they wanted. Even the incoming storm couldn't keep them back. It looks like they are preparing to enter the Grand Line. Oh yeah, one of them, no, both of them are zone fruit users. They are very strong. At least I've never seen such a strong pirate in the East Blue. If you attack them, you must be mentally prepared. Gawain raised a sinister smile, looked at the Guan's Masamune on the table, and said, "That's perfect. I feel I'm incredibly strong now. Also, if you are short of money, I can show you a way to make money, provided you can survive, of course." Van Augur instantly became energetic. "If you want to talk about this, then I won't be sleepy anymore." Gawain was speechless for a moment. He ignored Van Augur's call, hung up the Den Den Mushi directly, and focused his attention on this incident. His expression gradually darkened. "It seems that my name is still not loud enough. Anyone on the Grand Line dares to touch my things. They are tired of living." As the sound landed, Gawain grabbed the Guan's Masamune on the table, opened a door, and walked towards the harbor. At the same time, when the news of the attack on Raven Harbor spread across Pala Island, everyone was surprised at first and then filled with immense anger. How long has it been since the captain's name became known? Someone still dares to attack us? Given the captain's style, even if we chase them into the Grand Line this time, I'm afraid we'll have to kill them all. This time, the captain's sword will drink blood again. But how strong is the current captain? Who can tell for sure about this kind of thing? Amidst the noisy voices of the crowd, Kuro and other cadres stood quietly in the center of the harbor, waiting for Gawain's orders. Now, in their eyes, Raven Harbor has long been their territory, and for the pirates, such actions by the other party have far exceeded the scope of provocation. This is war. A bloody war between pirates is inevitable. While everyone was speechless, a burst of hurried footsteps came from a distance. Clatter. 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 Everyone turned around and saw a tall figure walking towards them quickly. Gawain walked past Kuro and the others, came to the front, and touched the flagpole of the pirate flag. The round shield and skull flag fluttered in the wind, rustling, and the sky and earth were filled with a solemn and murderous atmosphere. Gawain turned his head, looked at everyone, and said in a deep voice, "Now I can tell you clearly. Raven Harbor is the retreat path I chose for everyone. Those who have lost their fighting ability, those who are unable to go further due to illness, can survive there and even live comfortably. But now, someone has touched our cake. Can you accept this?" Suddenly, there was a thunderous roar from the crowd. Cannot. 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 The crowd was surging, and the noise was like thunder. In fact, over this period of time, the cooperation between the pirate crew and Raven Harbor has deepened. Their quality of life has improved visibly. More and more people are beginning to realize that Raven Harbor is a retreat chosen by Captain Gawain for his companions, who can no longer keep up. Although no one said it explicitly, they all kept this feeling of being touched in their hearts. To attack Raven Harbor would not only affect their own interests, but more importantly, it would destroy Gawain's hard work. In this era, let alone pirates, even the marines, and the nobles would not go to such an extent for their subordinates. "Captain, let me go. Even if I die on the battlefield, I will bite off a piece of flesh from those bastards." One pirate's eyes were red, but the person next to him didn't give in at all. "I'm better than him. How dare they destroy the captain's hard work and cut off our retreat path? Damn, bastard." The emotions of the crowd gradually intensified, and there was only blatant hatred in their eyes. Kuro looked around, his mind recalling his previous experiences. From Django to the Nayab brothers and then to Jin, Zoro, and Sanji, Gawain seems to have a kind of magic that can make his companions around him sincerely convinced of him. Even himself. "Damn it. I'm the one who's going to overthrow this guy and become captain." Kuro shook his head violently, trying to get rid of the inappropriate thoughts, but this attracted a strange look from Jin instead. "What?" "Nothing, I was just thinking about how to kill those bastards." Jin withdrew his gaze and quietly tightened the grip on Tronfa in his hand, and Zoro beside him did the same. Seeing that the pre-war mobilization was almost done, Gawain immediately began to make various arrangements. "Zoro, you forget it. Jin, you take a ship to Raven Harbor to maintain order there and prevent other forces from taking advantage of the opportunity to attack." "Yes," Jin responded. Zoro frowned. Hey, Captain, what do you mean by forget it?" Gawain glanced at him and said calmly, "A man who can walk out of the 50-meter track should not even think about leading a team alone." Chapter 91, Fight Smoker Again. Zoro's expression froze. He wanted to refute it, but then he remembered the last time he took the map and led Johnny and Yozaku. He can only swallow his anger and bear the consequences. Gawain glanced at him. "You and Sanji will stay on Pala Island together." Then he looked at Kuro and Nami. "You guys come with me. Nami will plan the sailing route." "Yes, Captain." The two responded at the same time. Soon, the pirates in the harbor have been counted. Gawain took Nami and Kuro onto the fastest sailing ship. With only a dozen pirates, he sailed out of the harbor according to the route set by Nami. Behind the ship, Pala Island gradually disappeared at the end of sight. In the distant sea, the sea breeze was howling, the clouds in the sky were as thick as lead, and lightning flashed from time to time. Nami held the nautical chart in one hand and a pen in the other and began to calculate repeatedly, but her brows were getting more and more furrowed. After a few minutes, she couldn't help but speak. "Captain, according to the current situation, Raven Harbor and a large area of nearby sea area are in the midst of a storm. With the structure of this ship, I'm afraid it won't last long sailing at this time." Gawain slowly pulled out Guan's Masamune, and the sharp blade reflected the lightning. On the sea in the distance, a huge wave more than 10 meters high hit head-on, but the next moment, it was torn into pieces by a silver-white light. Puff! The seawater rained down on the deck. Gawain looked indifferent and said, "Just plan the shortest route. With me here, this ship won't sink." Gawain held the sword in his hand, his tone revealing absolute confidence. Only then did he realize that he had become qualified to challenge the sea head-on. No matter how huge the waves are, just cut them into pieces with one slash. Kuro pushed his glasses inconspicuously, looked at the sword in Gawain's hand, and fell into deep thought for a moment. Not long ago, a storm could have made Gawain and himself extremely embarrassed, but now this man can ignore it. How much has his fighting power increased? Is Gawain getting stronger faster than him? His judgment turned out to be correct. He had been secretly working on his own without telling any of us, and he was even more competitive than he was. That light-hearted attitude is just to lull us into complacency. Damn it. For a while, in Kuro's mind, Gawain's insidiousness reached a new level. Nami looked at Kuro suspiciously, then turned her attention to Gawain, her lips curled up slightly. In that case, leave the sailing to me. Even though they set sail much earlier than us, there is only one way to enter the Grand Line from the East Blue, and that is to cross the Red Line. And the only way to cross the Red Line is to cross the reverse mountain. We just need to get there faster than they can. The boat was rocking along with the waves. Nami sat on the deck, gradually outlining a perfect route on the nautical chart. That's it. Helmsman, full left. 30 degrees. Yes. Following Nami's instructions, the ship changed its course and rushed towards the deepest part of the storm. Countless huge waves swept in but were torn apart by a silver-white flying slash. Gawain stood at the bow, opening up a new route for everyone. At the same time, a warship set out from Logetown and plunged into the storm. On the deck of the warship, white smoke rose. Smoker held 2 cigars in his mouth and looked at the distant sea with a serious expression. Standing next to him was Tashigi, who carefully explained the latest information. It has been confirmed. The pirates who escaped from Logetown before were subordinates of Hanafuda, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. The bounties on both Latch and Lebu are over 50 million. They are both zone fruit users. They attacked Raven Harbor yesterday afternoon for unknown reasons. They have now sailed back to the Grand Line. Captain Smoker, this is about the 7 warlords of the sea. Even if we have an order from Mr. Zephyr, I'm afraid it will be difficult to explain to the world government if we really capture them. Explain? Smoker exhaled a puff of smoke. It's up to them to give an explanation to the world. The incident at Raven Harbor just ended not long ago, and even the reconstruction of the harbor has not been completed yet. Hey, Tashigi, you won't forget it, right? The looks from those civilians. It was all right last time, but now I will never let these pirates go. Smoker took off the Nanashaku jet behind him and said, we must keep these bastards in the East Blue. Yes. The huge warship is not afraid of wind and waves. Even in a storm, its sailing speed is much faster than that of an ordinary pirate ship. But with the passage of time, the storm sweeping across East Blue has not only subsided but has shown a tendency to intensify. The turbulent sea shows a deep black color. The rushing sea water seems to swallow up everything it touches. In the endless storm, Smoker had long forgotten the time. He only knew that the Marines on the deck were replaced one after another. Finally, the sea in the distance calmed down, and the sky after the storm was cloudless and frighteningly clear. Only on the distant sea, the skull and crossbones flag with a round shield on the pirate ship was too dazzling, to the point that it could not be ignored. Smoker took the telescope and immediately saw the figure standing on the deck. White Knight Gawain. In just a moment, Smoker changes his plan to pursue Latch and Lebu and directly sets his target on Gawain. This guy is far more dangerous than Hanafuda's men. Chase them. Gawain naturally noticed the warship in the distance, but at the moment, he was focused on chasing Lebu and Latch and had no intention of getting entangled with the Marines. He directly orders the ship to speed up and leave the warships in the distance behind. But only in the next moment. Red flames rose from the warships in the distance, and a cannonball grazed the pirate ship under Gawain's feet and fell into the sea. Boom. The water column shot up into the sky, reflecting Gawain's livid face. Shame on you. As the voice fell, Gawain raised his hand and swung his sword in front of him, cutting the incoming shells in midair. Boom. 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 There was a series of explosions, bursts of fire rose up in the air, and black smoke obscured everyone's vision. Smoker in the distance was looking at the pirate ship and saw a figure rushing out from the flames, holding a sword, and rushing towards the warship under his feet. Gawain. Smoker roared, and his cape fluttered behind him without wind. Thinking of the disastrous defeat he had suffered at Gawain's hands and the attitude of the civilians in Raven Harbor, he felt aggrieved. Fortunately, all of this will be washed away today. For this day, in order to keep you in the East Blue, I have obtained guidance from Mr. Zephyr to defeat you. As Smoker spoke, thick white smoke rose up around him, almost completely covering the entire warship. The white smoke twisted and deformed, condensing into the shape of fists. What really concerned Gawain was the dark armament hockey on the fist formed by the white smoke. Chapter 92, Defeat you in one move. Are you cheating? In midair, Gawain looked at the white smoke in the distance, and the fist with armament hockey attached, and his lips couldn't help but twitch. In just a few months, Gawain cheated and even risked his life fighting Hawkeyes before he mastered the armament hockey, but Smoker turned around and caught up with him. You make this broken system look stupid. Although he was complaining, Gawain's eyes became sharp the next moment. Smoker awakens his armament hockey, which has far exceeded when he first appeared in the original timeline, but Gawain knows that his own progress is far faster than Smoker's. You have armament hockey, and so do I, and not just armament hockey. Oh. Gawain took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Then, the explosive force subsided, and his body gradually fell toward the sea surface. However, when he was about to fall into the sea, he stepped heavily on the sea surface. Boom! The water column shot up into the sky, reaching a height of tens of meters. With the help of this power, Gawain's already slowed down speed suddenly soared. The two branch features, swiftness and flash step, are activated at the same time, coupled with a physique, which has increased several times, and the absolute control over the body granted by harmony. Gawain's explosive speed was pushed to a terrifying level in an instant. He could even hear the sound of a sonic boom in his ears and a layer of white vapor condensed in the air in front of him. This was a sign that his speed had reached the sound barrier. At the same time, a layer of dark aura wrapped around Guan's mass immune, and the silver light symbolizing the extreme force also slowly lit up. One can break the natural elemental ability and touch the main body, and the other can greatly enhance the power of Gawain's slash. This configuration is enough to break the defense of most vice admirals, who are good at defense, and even some of the warlords of the sea. As for Smoker, it's impossible to stop it. One slash to beat you. Gawain's voice reached Smoker's ears. The latter didn't even have time to form a look of astonishment on his face before the white smoke covering the surrounding area was torn into pieces by Guan's mass immune's sharp edge. And the observation hockey, which he regarded as a secret weapon, did not send back a chilling sense of crisis until Gawain rushed in front of him. Escape! 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 But all this was too late. By the time Smoker realized something was wrong, a chill had already passed through his body. Whoosh! A blood mist burst out from Smoker's chest, and a hideous cut ran from his right shoulder all the way to his lower abdomen. The bones, muscles, and even internal organs touched were all severely damaged, and blood flowed everywhere. Then, the white smoke in the sky dissipated, and Smoker's body fell weakly from midair. His eyes were focused on Gawain beside him. A few months passed, and he practiced under Zephyr's guidance while risking his life. He even mastered the armament hockey that he had only touched the surface of before. He thought that even if he couldn't crush Gawain, he could at least win, but in the end, he got this result. At this moment, Smoker felt only endless frustration. Thump! The seriously injured Smoker fell into the raging sea, and his life or death was unknown. Gawain's figure landed steadily on the deck of the warship. He ignored the fear and vigilance on the faces of the Marines, slashed the mast with his sword, destroyed the power system of the warship, and then floated away. When he had done all this, no one dared to step forward to stop him. Even Tashigi was shocked by the bright red blood on Gawain's body and couldn't utter a word for a long time. After the pirate ship in the distance disappears into the sea, everyone came back to their senses. Tashigi looked at her hand holding the sword, only to find that the handle and scabbard were shaking constantly. No, it's not the sword that's shaking. It's her hand. Realizing this, Tashigi pursed her lips tightly. She tried her best, but she couldn't even draw her sword in front of that man. How could there be such a monster in the East Blue? Until the anxious calls of the surrounding Marines reached her ears. Tashigi just came to her senses and looked at the blood slowly rising from the sea in the distance while feeling extremely anxious. Quick! Divers go into the water to save Captain Smoker. When Smoker wakes up, it's already night. The wound on his chest had been stitched up by the ship's military doctor, but it was now emitting waves of burning pain, a sign of infection. In this era, wound infection at sea is almost a death sentence for most people. Even with Smoker's physical condition, he couldn't help but feel dizzy. Cough. Looking at the surroundings and Tashigi standing beside him, Smoker breathed a sigh of relief. White Knight Gawain, didn't that guy attack the people on the warship? Tashigi, who was standing beside Smoker, was a little dazed and nodded indifferently. After you were defeated, sir, he destroyed the ship's power system and left. Then should I thank him for sparing my life? Smoker laughed to himself. The battle started in an unexpected way but ended in an even more unexpected way. Thinking back now, Smoker only felt an indescribable feeling of powerlessness. He turned and looked out the porthole. All that meets his eye is the undulating sea and sea beasts that occasionally jump out of the water. Smoker gritted his teeth and said, after mastering armament hockey, my combat power is no less than that of the Rear Admiral from headquarters, but I couldn't even take a single move from that guy. Although I am very unwilling, that guy has now completely become powerful. The East Blue can't hold him, and even Paradise can't hold him. The New World is the stage for such a monster. As he spoke, Smoker instinctively reached into his arms, but he only felt a handful of air. Only then did he realize that his torn clothes had been taken off and replaced with a set of hospital clothes. The cigar he brought with him was placed on the table beside the bed, but it had been soaked by seawater and could not be used. Smoker extended his palm to his chest and slowly clenched it into a fist. He exerted so much force that the veins on his arm popped out, and a crackling sound came from between his fingers. Tashigi, this is our mistake. We should correct it ourselves. But now we are no longer qualified to fight that kind of monster. I need strength, something stronger and more invincible, enough to defeat all pirates and enforce justice. Report this incident to the headquarters, ask for help from the nearby branch bases, and report Labu and Latch's situation. Dashigi grasped the sword in her hand and felt a force from the hilt. Her eyes gradually became firm. Understood. At the same time, a small pirate ship was heading towards the red line at full speed. Gawain stood on the deck. Next to him was Kuro, whose mouth was constantly twitching. That kind of power that can dye a sword black and even directly attack a Logia fruit user is definitely armament hockey, right? The more he spoke, the more Kuro became excited. I was wondering why you are so familiar with hockey. Even if you follow my method, you easily awaken observation hockey. You already have the feeling, right? So, the previous battle on Pala Island, the one where I thought I was about to surpass you, was it also you playing a trick on me? Chapter 93, Gawain, am so gentle Gawain was stunned and didn't know how to explain. Because what Kuro said was right but not entirely right. It is true that I acted for your sake, but it is also true that I did not master the armament hockey at that time. After hesitating for a while, Gawain was about to speak when he was rudely interrupted by Kuro. You don't have to say any more. I understand everything. Kuro's eyes were visibly red. You're hiding your weakness on purpose so as not to dampen my motivation to move forward, right? Jin is right. You are too gentle. You always think about your companions. It was like this in Raven Harbor, it was like this in the battle with Kokoyasi village, and it was also like this when you risked your life against Hawk Eyes. We evil people are not worth it. How long can you be so naive? Between his words, Kuro grabbed Gawain by the collar. The bewildered look on Gawain's face made him more certain that his guess was correct. Even his thoughts began to wander, and he unconsciously thought of the time when he first met Gawain. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that with Gawain's character, he couldn't be a person who pursued status and fame. So, what was the reason that motivated him to become a warlord? So even becoming a warlord and having a stable life was just a temporary reason you found to give me the motivation to live? Even you yourself are working hard to fulfill your original promise while pretending to be so relaxed during the day. You just don't want us companions to worry. You. Well. Kuro sighed and lowered his arm tremblingly. You think I'll be grateful to you for doing this? Don't dream, I'm a pirate. A pirate without a heart. After a series of outputs, every sentence deviates from the facts but seems to be logically sound. Gawain was a little confused by what Kuro said for a moment. Don't explain. Kuro shook his head, revealing a look that saw through everything, and said firmly, You've come this far. If I don't let you become the king of the pirates, you don't deserve to live in this world as a man. The quarrel between the two quickly attracted the attention of everyone on the boat. The dozen or so pirates who came with the team all gathered on the deck at this moment, looking at Gawain with moved faces, and many of them even shed tears. So the captain has taken on so much without us even realizing it? Yes. Isn't Raven Harbor also considered for us? What a kind and righteous man. Ouch. For a while, the only sounds on the deck were the pirates howling. Nami, who was standing outside the crowd and watching Gawain, had already picked up a tissue and started wiping her tears. If there was anyone present who could 100% empathize with what Kuro was feeling at the moment, it was only Nami. After all, she was the one who was truly saved by Gawain. Everything Kuro said was in perfect agreement with the image of Gawain in her mind. Mr. Gawain, so powerful and yet gentle. Simply. Woo-woo-woo. After a few seconds, Gawain was drowned in everyone's tears. He could bear it when someone wiped their tears on his clothes, but when he saw a few bastards wiping their noses at his clothes, he could no longer endure it anymore. No, that's a bit rude of you. The corner of Gawain's mouth twitched, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he looked at the people who surrounded him. The truth has been revealed, but it seems that there is no problem. In short, it seems that what needs to be rolled up will be rolled up, but the style is a little bit wrong. Just at this moment, a huge wave came from a distance, almost sweeping the small sailboat into the sea, and the people surrounding Gawain were instantly washed away. There were even two unlucky guys who were swept into the sea and had to work very hard to climb out. But after such a commotion, everyone returned to their posts and concentrated on sailing. Only Kuro remained standing beside Gawain and said in a deep voice, I will not give up on surpassing you, but at the same time, I will let you sit on the throne of King of the Pirates. This is my promise. As he spoke, Kuro stretched out his fist. Gawain shook his head helplessly and also stretched out his fist to bump into him. The sailboat rides the wind and waves. With Nami planning the route in real time and Gawain taking action to smash all obstacles along the way, the pirate ship sailed much faster than imagined. Just 4 days later, they had already arrived at the reverse mountain in front of the red line. After asking the residents on the islands along the way and confirming that no one saw the pirates passing by, Gawain led everyone to the nearby sea area to guard. On the other hand, when Labu and Latch lead the pirate ship through Logue Town, they simply replenish some food and fresh water and quickly set sail. Latch looked at the town that was gradually shrinking behind him with a hint of unwillingness in his eyes. That Logia-type bastard isn't here? Hateful. Originally, I was planning to get back to the situation from last time. Even if he has sea prism stone weapons, he's no match for me. Labu shook his head and said, that guy is a marine, after all. If we really kill him, we won't be able to explain to Hanafuda-sama. Besides, Labu looked at the wound on Latch's body that had just healed and finally couldn't help but say, I observed last time that guy's strength is not that simple. If we really fight, we may not be his opponent in a one-on-one fight. Will I lose to him? Latch suddenly raised his voice, but he also turned his head intentionally, seeming a little lacking in confidence. While the two were arguing, a pirate came out of the cabin, licking his lips while revealing a lustful eye. Captain, the brothers want to know about the woman we robbed in the harbor. He. As he spoke, several pirates surrounded him at the same time. Apparently, they have been coveting Gaza for a long time, but they never had the courage to do so before. But now they can't help it. Don't even think about it. Labu glanced at them, his eyes were cold and emotionless. That woman has outstanding appearance, pure body, and is a person with devil fruit ability. If it is put on the slave market, it can easily be sold for dozens or even 100 times the price of ordinary prey. With that money, you can find women anywhere you want. Everyone was unwilling and said, but the brothers are. Just find a fish of similar size and solve the problem yourself. If I find out that someone has touched her, I will feed him to the fish. There was something unquestionable in Labu's tone. The pirates were unwilling to give in, but they were even more afraid of the man in front of them, so they had no choice but to leave in disappointment. The prison cell of this ship is located at the bottom of the cabin. Every place that can let in light is sealed. It is depressing and dark. Bang! The ship was shaking, and unknown objects in the cabin collided with each other, making a harsh noise. Gaza curled up in the corner of the cell and suddenly hugged her legs tighter. She opened her eyes wide, trying to see what was moving, but all she saw was darkness. Chapter 94, Cat Abuse. I am still too weak. Even if I have eaten a devil fruit and gained power beyond that of the harbor's guards, I am still not comparable to the monsters in the Grand Line. Last time, I could rely on Mr. Gawain to solve all the obstacles, but this time. The more she thought about it, the more Gaza felt guilty. Originally, she thought that as long as she worked hard to govern the harbor well and make the residents' lives prosperous, she could be called an excellent lord. But now it seems that she was too naive after all. In this turbulent era, pirates are rampant, the marines are inactive, and the nobles, because of their own greed and the existence of heavenly tribute, do their utmost to exploit the common people, even to the point of driving them to death. The only way to gain a foothold is to have strong power. A strength far more powerful than anyone else. If I can be rescued, if there is still a future, I will absolutely gain a power more powerful than anyone else. Thinking of this, Gaza's pupil shrank suddenly, and she finally understood the fundamental reason why she had fallen into this situation twice. Those who are waiting to be rescued will never be liberated. No. I want to survive at all costs. Even if I have to compete with wild dogs on the roadside for food and give up everything I have, I must survive. Live until the day I gain enough power. With these thoughts surging in her mind, although Gaza was exhausted physically and mentally, she found the real pillar of her spiritual world at this moment. The ship was rocking, there were constant noises in the darkness, and there was even a pirate with a lewd smile guarding the door. Gaza, who realized what she really wanted, had no fear in her heart. She hopes to survive at all costs and gain power. In the dark, Gaza's trembling body gradually stopped. Gaza closed her eyes and quietly waited for her final fate or the moment to fight back. She didn't know how much time had passed in the darkness, but the ship's shaking suddenly intensified as if it was under artillery fire, and panicked footsteps were heard outside the cell. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Gaza slowly opened her eyes and, according to her memory, struggled to crawl towards the door. The next moment, whoosh! A silver light cut deeply into the hull and dissipated a few centimeters away from Gaza's eyes. Gaza gritted her teeth, dragged her body, which was weakened by the sea prism stone handcuffs, and crawled out of the cell along the crack. Only now did she realize it, the light almost tore the pirate ship apart completely, and the sunlight shone straight in through the cracks. She was also able to see the sea in the distance and the fluttering pirate flag on the sea with a round shield carved with a skull drawn on it. Mr. Gawain. Gaza looked at the figure rushing towards her from a distance, her face flushed, and her eyes became wet. He must have come here for her, right? No, no, no. Is it for the injured companions? But there should be a part of me as well, right? For a while, Gaza was in a state of panic until the increasingly violent shaking of the ship brought her back to her senses, and she struggled to escape to a safe place. At this moment, on the pirate ship, everyone was busy fighting the enemy and had no time to care about the movements of the captive. Gawain, who was rushing over, slammed heavily onto the deck. The violent impact force caused the entire pirate ship to sink slightly, displacing more seawater. Lebu and Latch looked at the horrific cuts on the hull, then turned to look at Gawain with unspeakable rage in their hearts, a swordsman who has mastered the flying/attack? In a place like the East Blue, you can indeed do whatever you want, but do you know the consequences of provoking us? While speaking, Latch arched his back and transformed into a human beast form. His tall and thin figure, combined with the cat's appearance, made him look even more ferocious. Lebu's face was also cold. He also transformed into a human beast form. His body expanded rapidly, his sturdy body was covered with gnarled muscles, and his sharp teeth flashed with a cold light. Originally, he was much shorter than Latch, but after transforming into human beast form, he was much taller than Latch, with his height approaching 4 meters. With his exaggerated muscles, he looked like a wall standing in front of Gawain. At this moment, 2 big cats were standing on the deck. There was no need for words. The murderous aura emanating from the 2 men frightened the surrounding pirates, and they all stayed away. Some people were even afraid of being affected, so they jumped into the sea holding life buoys. Lebu-sama and Latch-sama transform into human beast form at the same time. They even killed a pirate with a bounty of over 100 million belly when they joined forces. That guy is dead. If they dare to attack the lizard pirates, they must be prepared to suffer the consequences. Everyone looked at Gawain, their eyes full of anger, and they even regarded him as half-dead. Gawain, holding a sword in one hand, turned to look at Lebu and Latch with a cold gaze. You smashed my place and stole my thing. Why would I be called a pirate if I let you leave so easily? Where is my thing and people? Latch's mouth curled up into a sinister smile. So that harbor is really your territory? That's a pity. The brothers on the ship had already played that woman to death. She was still shouting your name until her death. As for that devil fruit, we ate it a long time ago. Latch, who was standing by, also had a hint of mockery on his face and said jokingly, although you look quite different from the photo on the wanted poster, you must be White Knight Gawain. With a bounty of 85 million belly, it sounds quite impressive. But the strength on the Grand Line and the Four Seas is different. Even if the bounty is the same, there is a fundamental difference between the pirates who fought their way through the Grand Line and you, a small fry. Even if you have mastered the flying slash, you're still a small fry. Gawain looked at the 2 catmen and frowned slightly. Although abusing cats is somewhat against the moral order, cat people shouldn't be considered cats. Latch understood the meaning of Gawain's words. His face looked extremely ugly, and murderous intent was burning in his heart. He bent his back and exerted force with his feet, causing the deck to dent. Then he shot out like a spring. The sharp claws on his fingertips flashed a cold light in the air, and in an instant, they grabbed Gawain's face. Zone fruit users have strong physiques, and with proper training, Latch can even easily tear apart steel plates and the hull of a pirate ship. Whoosh! The sharp claws slashed towards Gawain, but the familiar feeling of cutting flesh and blood did not come. While Latch was distracted, he saw 2 cat-like arms flying out, making him slightly stunned. Then he felt a piercing pain and realized that it was his arm. In just a second, the severe pain of the broken arm rushed into Latch's mind, so much so that he could not even maintain his human beast form, and he knelt in front of Gawain wailing. Ah! Chapter 95, what a coincidence. Blood gushed out along Latch's arm, and his face turned extremely pale, but he calmed down in the next moment. It was because a bloody silver-white sword was pressing on his shoulder, and the force from the sword made him unable to straighten his back. Gawain looked down at Latch from above, his indifferent expression unable to conceal the murderous intent rising in his heart. Where is my thing and people? The same words came out of Gawain's mouth again, and the pirates on the deck had different feelings. Is that real? Did he really easily cut off Latch-sama's arm? Can the East Blue really give birth to such a monster? Hallucination. It must be an illusion. A pirate who fell into the sea due to the previous attack looked at this scene like a madman, his face full of disbelief. He wanted to deny the facts before his eyes, but the cold sea water around him kept irritating his nerves. On deck, the aggressive Lebu now looked like a frightened cat, with a hair on his waist and back standing up high. He took several steps back until he reached the edge of the deck. Cold sweat began to seep out of his forehead, and he no longer had the arrogant attitude he had just now. It was just because he knew his own strength, which was slightly stronger than Latch's but roughly at the same level. Gawain was able to cut off Latch's arm so easily that he could cut off his own head. He had only felt this kind of oppressive feeling from his own captain, the man known as the Lizard King. Wait. We are from the Lizard Pirates. We are recognized as warlord by the world government. To go against us is to go against the 7 warlords of the sea and the world government. You must think clearly about the consequences. At this moment, the flag of the 7 warlords of the sea has become the last umbrella of protection in Labu's heart. It's not like they haven't faced opponents stronger than themselves before, but when those people saw the banner of the 7 warlords of the sea, they all retreated in fear. It should be the same this time, right? There will be no exceptions. 7 warlords of the sea? Gawain paused slightly as he pressed the sword against Latch's shoulder. Seeing this, Labu thought that his words had worked and was about to continue speaking. Whoosh! After a piercing sound, Labu saw with his own eyes that Latch's head jumped high into the air and was caught steadily by Gawain. The pungent and hot blood splashed all over Labu, blocking all the words he had yet to say. He stared blankly at the man in front of him, feeling that he no longer understood this world at all. When normal pirates hear the names of the 7 warlords of the sea and the world government, shouldn't they flee? Why are there such outliers in this world? Why is he so powerful? The thing that answers him is only Gawain's slightly joking voice. That's a coincidence. I'm planning to take down a warlord's head and replace their position. Aren't you just giving me a pillow when I'm sleepy? That guy's name is Hanafuda, right? Whoosh! Gawain swung his sword, shaking off the blood on it, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. You go first, but he will go down to accompany you soon. Labu was startled and felt a piercing chill rushing to the top of his head. His eyes were wide open with fear, so much so that his pupil shrank into a slit. Bang! Labu pulled back violently, even jumping off the deck. Even though the seawater below was dark blue, which was no different from hell for a person with devil fruit abilities, he no longer cared about this. He just wants to get away from this completely illogical man in front of him as quickly as possible. He deeply regretted why he took on this task in the first place and hated why the East Blue gave birth to this monster before his eyes, but he just didn't have the courage to stay. Because this guy would really kill him without hesitation. Have mercy on me, please, that woman and that devil fruit are here, I can in midair. Labu was still begging for mercy, but he fell silent halfway through his words. On the deck, Gawain swung his sword, but there was no sight of any flying slashing coming. Thump! Labu heard the sound of a heavy object falling into the water. He looked down. Then he saw a big cat without its head slowly turning back into a human form and being swallowed by the sea. That's my body? The last thoughts flashed through Labu's mind before he fell into eternal darkness. Thump! 2 almost completely overlapping sounds of objects falling into the sea were heard on the ship. The pirates looked at the 2 heads slowly sinking into the sea, and for a moment, they were filled with fear. Even monsters like Labu-sama and Latch-sama, the pirates on the deck had expressions of extreme fear on their faces. They were so nervous that their speech was a little unclear, but they could only beg for mercy for a way to live. I want to live, please. Don't kill me. They forced me to do this. I don't want to be a pirate. Bang. 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 There were a series of kneeling sounds on the deck. Some people even had wet lower bodies mixed with yellow and white substances, emitting a strange smell. Gawain looked around. Even if the murderous intent was released unintentionally, it was enough to make the pirates around unable to muster the slightest desire to resist. Seeing this, Gawain joked, "You don't regret it, you know you are going to die. By the way, can anyone tell me where the woman and my devil fruit that you stole are? I can spare his life." The pirate closest to Gawain immediately spoke up. I know. Before he could finish his words, the 2 pirates beside him covered his mouth and nose and pressed him to the ground. Then, the 2 of them wanted to speak first but were held down by more people. For a moment, the deck fell into an unprecedented melee. Everyone wanted to fight for the only chance to survive, and they were even willing to turn their swords against their companions who they had been living with day and night. Gawain even saw someone stabbing a sword into his companion's body, bringing out bloody flesh. That's right, how can such a person have companions in their heart? The deck was becoming increasingly chaotic. Gawain watched all this indifferently until a girl with a determined look came out of the cabin holding an exquisite gift box in both hands and said softly, "Mr. Gawain, this is a gift I prepared for you." The crowd fell silent for a moment, and everyone looked at Gaza and the treasure chest in Gaza's hand in despair. Some people wanted to snatch it, but they couldn't move their legs because Gawain's invisible aura was like a mountain, pressing them down and making them breathless. Gaza, who witnessed all this, felt extremely happy. When they first massacred the harbor guards, their expressions were as ferocious and their actions as brutal as they were now, just as they were desperate and helpless. These people are just like this. They bully the weak at will, but when faced with the strong, they can only wag their tails and beg for mercy. Gawain was stunned for a moment as he looked at Gaza, whose appearance had changed drastically. It took a lot of effort for him to connect the beautiful girl in front of him with the plain-looking Gaza in Raven Harbor a few months ago. Then he breathed a sigh of relief and blurted out, "You had plastic surgery?" Chapter 96. No one left behind. Gaza shook her head slightly, a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, and she said lightly, "I ate a devil fruit, and it was the devil fruit that brought about the change in my appearance." "It's the paramsha, smooth fruit." Gawain nodded, but his eyes remained on Gaza until her face turned visibly red before he withdrew his gaze. He doesn't know if it's an illusion. Gawain felt an unprecedented power from Gaza, just like Kuro, who realized his true self in the bloody battle. He sent a probe in his mind, but the evaluation that appeared in front of him made him slightly stunned. Name, Gaza, potential, bronze, rating, iron, understand her true self, and pursue absolute power. This woman. Has she attained enlightenment on the ship? Bronze level potential? Gawain barely suppressed his inner surprise and nodded to Gaza. Just be alive. Thanks. Gaza pursed her lips tightly as if she had made up her mind, presented the treasure box with both hands, bowed, and said, "Mr. Gawain, please give me the power to protect Raven Harbor." Gawain looked down at the determined girl in front of him and rubbed her head with his hand. Then, from today on, the flag of the White Knight Pirate will be planted in Raven Harbor. No. Gaza shook her head. "Mr. Gawain, I don't need your protection. What I need is strength, enough to protect the people of Raven Harbor and Jasmine in troubled times." Gawain was stunned for a moment, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "So that's what you mean. If you board my ship, you will get the strength you desire." "Of course, on paper, you are still the Lord of Raven Harbor, and we are just a pirate active near Raven Harbor. In fact, whether it is the Marines, pirates, or nobles who are paying attention to this matter, as long as they are not mentally ill, they can see the connection between the current Raven Harbor and the White Knight Pirate. But as long as Gawain and Gaza don't take the initiative to expose it, no one will dare to do it. After all, when the top pirates in the East Blue and even the Marines were picked off one by Gawain, he has become a de facto overlord, a lord with a fixed territory and who acts according to the rules. In this situation, there might be people in the Marines, pirates, or nobles on the East Blue who hate Gawain, but few people really expect the White Knight Pirate to fall. Because the next pirate who reaches the top of the East Blue will most likely not be as obedient as Gawain. Gawain knew this, and so did Gaza. She naturally understood what Gawain meant and said excitedly, "Then please give me more advice." "Captain Gawain." Gawain nodded, then turned to look at the pirates on the deck. Everyone was too afraid to move, and when they saw Gawain looking at them, they lowered their heads even lower, wishing they could just move their heads closer to him to do the job. There was no trace of the bloodthirsty and crazy look they had in Raven Harbor before. "Gawain-sama, we surrender. We are from the Grand Line and know where Hanafuda's treasure is hidden. I am still valuable. I know his base, I know everything about him. As long as you let me go, I can tell you everything." Faced with the danger of death, these pirates could no longer hold on and betrayed Hanafuda without hesitation. Gawain's eyes turned cold instead. "You can betray Hanafuda so easily, and you can betray me just as easily." Everyone was stunned and felt speechless for a moment. They just felt that the aura that was already pressing down on them suddenly increased a bit, even making it hard for them to breathe. Someone looked up and saw Gawain's eyes without a trace of pity. "Besides, as the captain, I have to give an explanation to the brothers who died in Raven Harbor and the Nayab brothers who were injured by you." After speaking, Gawain leaned over, picked up a sword from the deck, turned around, put it in Gaza's hand, and said lightly, "Since you have decided to become a pirate and pursue strength, then prove it to me. Don't spare any of the pirates on this ship." Gaza's hand holding the sword trembled slightly, then she steadied herself. The scenes that had happened in Raven Harbor appeared before her eyes again, making her hold the sword in her hand tighter. "Okay." As the sound landed, under the horrified gazes of the pirates, Gaza took a step forward, and the sword in her hand cut into the body of a pirate. Whoosh! The slash was smooth and did not encounter any resistance. After eating the smooth fruit, she has become extremely familiar with the extent of her abilities. Her body can become frictionless, and naturally, the sword in her hand can also become frictionless. In exchange, she gained a slashing ability that even Gawain was surprised about. The warm blood splattered on Gaza's face. The slippery touch gave her goosebumps instantly. However, the discomfort that could have made her nauseous was swallowed up by anger and hatred in the next moment. "She's crazy. This woman is crazy. Run away." "We." The pirates looked at Gaza, who was swinging her sword like a madman, and felt their souls tremble. At this moment, they had already lost all their courage because of the previous scenes, and the only thing they wanted to do was to turn around and flee. Get out of this damn place and go back to the Grand Line. It's a paradise, after all. For the first time in their lives, they felt fear, towards this sea called East Blue. But after just a few steps back, all they had before them was the surging sea. Thump. As the sound of the first pirate falling into the water was heard, the pirates on the deck jumped into the sea like dumplings. But before they could rejoice, a burst of fire rose from the small pirate ship in the distance. Boom. A cannonball accurately hit the pirate who fell into the water, and the limbs and blood instantly dyed the sea red. Kuro stood on the deck, looking indifferently at the ship in the distance, and said coldly, "After all, that guy's order was to leave no one alive. How could I let you escape so easily?" Nami, who was standing next to Kuro, pursed her lips and forced herself to continue looking. The voyages during this period had already made her realize that the world of pirates was never a fairy tale world, and blood, killing, and plunder were the eternal themes. Among them, the White Knight pirate can be regarded as an absolute outlier. Besides, didn't those pirates did not hesitate when they slashed their companions with their knives before? Blood debt can only be repaid with blood. Belmir's death taught Nami this lesson. In the firelight, Gaza was covered in blood, but her face was as cold as ice. As the killing continued, her grip on the sword grew steadier, and her heart grew harder. Seeing that all the pirates on the deck had fallen into the water, Gaza simply turned around and walked into the cabin. After a few breaths, screams were heard from the cabin. When Gaza came out, her whole body was dyed red by the blood of pirates. She looked hideous yet revealed a unique beauty. "Captain, do you think those guards felt the same pain when they died?" Chapter 97, That's My Line. Looking at Gawain in front of her, Gaza couldn't help but ask. "Ah, but now they should be able to rest in peace." Gawain responded, and then he saw Gaza's body soften and fall backward. He hurried forward to help Gaza up. Only then did he realize that Gaza's body had already reached its limit. The hunger and fatigue accumulated over half a month had almost worn her down. Gaza was just holding on by relying on her own will. Gawain reached out and checked Gaza's breath, and after making sure that she was okay, he carried Gaza on his shoulder and grabbed the treasure chest containing the devil fruit. Then he jumped up and landed steadily on his pirate ship. After Gawain handed Gaza over to the ship's doctor to treat her injuries, he turned around and looked at the pirate ship in the distance. He raised his hand and slashed with his sword. Whoosh! The silver-white flying slash directly cut the pirate ship in the middle, breaking it into two parts, and it was completely swallowed by the sea in a few seconds. Gawain then turned his attention to the treasure chest in his hand and opened the lid, revealing the devil fruit hidden inside. "Is this a devil fruit?" Nami came closer. Looking at the strange fruit in the treasure chest that is red all over and covered with thorns. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand to touch it and said in surprise, "It is said that after eating it, one can gain all kinds of magical powers, such as turning into an animal or controlling elements like lightning and fire. The key is. It is said that this one alone can be sold at an auction for hundreds of millions of belly." Kuro, on the side, glanced at the fruit, then raised his hand to push up his glasses and said calmly, "After eating it, you will lose the ability to swim and become a complete landlubber. More than 90% of the world is covered by seawater, so there is no room for landlubbers. Don't blame me for not reminding you." Gawain nodded and said, "When the cost is greater than the benefit, it is definitely impossible to eat. For example, if this devil fruit is the human fruit, it would be pure fun." Nami was stunned. Human fruit? Gawain explained, "After eating it, you will gain the ability to transform into a human. But we are human beings. So not only will you not be able to gain special ability, you will also become a landlubber." When Gawain's voice fell, the two of them felt bored for a moment, and their interest in the devil fruit disappeared immediately. Seeing this, Gawain was too lazy to continue explaining. His eyes fell on the devil fruit in the treasure chest, and he gave up the idea of eating it immediately. Although this fruit was enough to attract the attention of a warlord to come down from the Grand Line to seize it, it is likely to be some rare devil fruit, perhaps even a Logia or a mythical zone fruit. However, it cannot be ruled out that he accepted a commission or that this devil fruit is an auxiliary ability. After eating it, not only will there be no obvious increase in his strength, but it will also bring serious defects. The trouble is not worth it. At least Gawain didn't plan to eat it until he knew what kind of fruit it was. Bang! He closed the treasure chest, turned, and walked into the cabin. The battle ends here. After confirming that there were no survivors, Kuro, who remained on the deck, commanded everyone to sail back. As the flag of the White Knight pirate disappeared from sight, waves began to rise on the sea in front of the Red Line. The bloodthirsty shark greedily devoured the floating corpse, leaving only a torn pirate flag that swayed with the waves. When a marine ship arrived here, all they saw was the aftermath of the battle. The leading Marines officer frowned, feeling an ominous premonition for some reason. When the Marines on the ship salvaged a pirate flag with a lizard skull on it, the Marine officer felt a chill in his vest for an instant. He then ordered the divers on the ship to go down to the sea to explore, and as expected, they found a large pirate ship broken into 2 pieces on the seabed. A pirate ship under the command of Hanafuda, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, was sunk in the East Blue. The culprit is suspected to be White Knight Gawain, the most famous pirate in the East Blue at this time. The East Blue is about to change. This matter is beyond the scope of the Marines in East Blue. Report it to the headquarters immediately. Quick. Raven Harbor. After the Lord was captured by pirates, Jasmine lacked the ability to win the support of the people. At this moment, this place was in great chaos, the ships could not set sail normally, and even several pirates who had been expelled by the Nayab brothers took the opportunity to invade and try to get a piece of the pie. Under a series of internal and external pressures, the situation in Raven Harbor became increasingly deteriorating. When Jasmine was in despair, Jin led the team to the scene. With bronze-level combat power, placed in the East Blue where the average bounty is less than 5 million belly, it would definitely be a massacre. After Jin killed several pirates whose bounties were higher than the average in East Blue, the situation around Raven Harbor suddenly stabilized. The order within the harbor was restored at an astonishing speed, and the number of merchant ships coming to Raven Harbor for transshipment and supplies was even greater than before. This is the sense of security brought by force. In the Lord's mansion, the Nayab brothers, Django and Van Auger, who luckily managed to survive, lay quietly on the hospital beds. The few people were chatting idly. Well, what kind of person is that man? Van Auger couldn't help but ask. During the time he was in Raven Harbor, he heard civilians and people in the Lord's mansion talking about Gawain countless times. The respect and gratitude in those people's words were so great that they could no longer be concealed. He had never seen a pirate receive such evaluation from civilians. Pirates. Aren't they just burning, killing, looting, and leaving a mess behind? Why is there such an anomaly in the East Blue? Captain Gawain? Sham saw Van Auger nod, and a slight smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He was once the Knight Commander of the Kingdom of Goa, and he was also the man who gave us, the evil pirates, a new life. But she, on the side, nodded heavily, turned to look at Van Auger, opened his eyes wide, and said, "That's right. He is totally unqualified as a pirate, but as a leader, there is no greater sense of belonging than being his subordinate." Sham's mouth twitched. "You were using my words. Don't worry about the details. Asshole." Meow. The 2 men started fighting on the spot, and even though they both had serious injuries, they were unable to stop the 2 men, who were gradually starting a quarrel. Van Auger couldn't help but smile, but he also felt unspeakable regret. It's just a pity. Even that guy wouldn't be able to survive against an opponent from the Grand Line. Bang. The rude sound of a door opening interrupted Van Auger's words. He turned around and saw Jasmine, who looked extremely excited. "Mr. Gawain and his crew have already returned. They will arrive here in a few days." Van Auger was stunned. Has he given up? No. Jasmine shook her head. According to the young lady, no, the Lord, Mr. Gawain only slashed a few times to kill those 2 bastards. Chapter 98, Fruit. Choosing a master. Jasmine stretched out 2 fingers and shook them at Van Auger with a proud expression on her face. Even the monsters coming down from the Grand Line are not Mr. Gawain's opponents. After that, in Van Auger's dull eyes, Jasmine placed 2 fruit baskets between the Nayab brothers. Butchie picked up one of them and just wanted to put it in his mouth, but he stopped his hand and couldn't help saying, "Isn't that natural? Captain Gawain is like this, you never know when he will come up with a new trump card or a powerful force beyond your imagination." Sham nodded. I'm used to it, I'm used to it." The Nayab brothers were not surprised by this because, in their minds, Gawain is the strongest. No matter who the opponent is, no matter what the difficulty is, as long as Gawain is there, they can overcome it. The same is true for Jasmine, who has experienced 2 wars in Raven Harbor. They have fought with Latch and Lebu before. Only Van Auger on the side opened his mouth slightly, his eyes filled with unbelievable emotions. Therefore, he also knew how powerful the opponent was. The opponent has eaten zone fruit, giving them a strong physique. But even without the devil fruit, those 2 people are enough to run rampant in the East Blue with just physical skills, and they can beat others easily, including the fishmen Arlong and Admiral Krieg, who are already not physically weak. At least in Van Auger's memory, there is no one in the East Blue who can fight with Latch and Lebu. Wait, these 2 people seem to have been killed by Gawain? At this moment, Van Auger suddenly realized that those powerful beings in the East Blue in his memory seemed to have been taken down by Gawain. Realizing this, he couldn't help but sigh. This is fate. Now, there is no reason to refuse that guy's invitation. Sham was slightly stunned. "The captain invited you to board our ship." During this period, the pirates in the sea area near Raven Harbor were basically handled by the Nyaban brothers and Django, while Van Augur was responsible for the security of the harbor. The two sides cooperated seamlessly and gradually recognized each other's abilities. "You kid." At this moment, when they heard that Gawain invited Van Augur, the Nyaban brothers couldn't help but smile happily. "You want the dividend rights? It's really the right time. If it's a few months later, you can only wait until next year to get the dividend rights." Van Augur wondered, "What is that?" Butchie scratched his head and explained, "The rules are complicated and cannot be explained in a few words. You can understand it as, through a martial arts tournament, the ranking of the internal combat power on the ship is determined. The higher the ranking, the more money you can get." Van Augur's breathing became visibly rapid. He didn't know how much the White Knight pirate could earn in a year, but he knew how much influence the White Knight pirate had now. With the collapse of large pirate crews such as Krieg and Arlong pirates, the White Knight pirate became the undisputed overlord of East Blue. In addition, this incident will soon be spread out, and by then, the reputation of the White Knight pirate in the East Blue will soar to another level. After all, in order to protect its forces, it did not hesitate to fight against the monsters coming down from the Grand Line and even prevented them from leaving the East Blue. The Marines may not be able to do this, but the White Knight pirate can. It can be said that after this incident, as long as Gawain is willing to offer a price, countless town managers and nobles in East Blue will hand their money in exchange for his protection. Just lying at home and getting belly in the account, this kind of thing Van Augur never dared to think about before. And according to the Nyaban brothers, as long as he takes the top few places in the ranking, the prophet for the next year will have his own share. Van Augur's eyes turned red. "Everyone, please give me more advice in the future." "Wait." Van Augur's sight suddenly noticed the strange-shaped fruit in Sham and Butchie's hand, and he was startled. Sham and Butchie only felt an indescribable taste poured into their mouth. After 2 consecutive crisp sounds, the two people's faces instantly turned purple, and they opened their mouths to retch, but nothing came out. Butchie stuck out his tongue, using the cool air passing through his mouth to relieve the bad taste in his mouth. He then lowered his head and found that he had bitten in half a strange fruit. "Is this fruit expired? What is this?" Sham looked at the fruit in his hand and was also slightly absent-minded, like a cat's head. Jasmine looked at the strange fruits in the hands of the two people and was a little confused for a while. "I clearly remember that I didn't buy this kind of fruit, only some apples and oranges. How could it be?" The 3 people were puzzled. Van Augur's voice came, "That's probably the legendary devil fruit. I didn't expect to see it here." As soon as his voice fell, the Nyaban brothers sitting on the bed next to him changed. Their bodies expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye, and in just a few seconds, they turned into 2 huge cats. Van Augur was caught off guard and sat on the ground after being squeezed out by Butchie. Jasmine was quick-witted and saw the 2 changing. She ran to the door and avoided being affected. She looked back into the room again and saw 2 big cats, one fat and one thin, huddled together in a daze. Jasmine realized what had happened instantly. "Lion and cheetah? Did you eat a devil fruit?" A few minutes later, the noise in the ward gradually subsided, and only 2 desperate voices were heard. "It's over, I've become a landlubber." Van Augur's wounds almost burst, and he grimaced in pain, but he didn't forget to remind them, "That's a devil fruit worth 100 million belly, and this devil fruit seems to be from the 2 pirates who came down from the Grand Line. How could this happen?" The Nyaban brothers' focus was not on this at all. When they heard the shocking figures from Van Augur's mouth, they felt pain for a moment. Van Augur rolled his eyes. "I just ate hundreds of millions of belly? Is it too late for me to spit it out now? What do you think? Whoa. It hurts so much." At the same time, what happened in the East Blue was also sent to the Marine headquarters through the report of the East Blue's Marines. A group of senior Marine officials are now gathering in a conference room in Maniford. Everyone looked at the report in their hands, and the expressions on their faces became solemn. "I have some impression of that guy, Smoker. He is also a graduate of the Marine Academy and even an excellent Marine who ranks among the top. Although his personality is too strong and he often disobeys orders from his superiors, his strength is still better than most of the pirates in Paradise. Even he was defeated? And in the weakest sea? It seems that this time, 4 seas is really starting to get turbulent. But the Marines cannot watch the seeds of evil take root and sprout." Chapter 99. How do you know that the bounty of the man I value has increased again? For a while, the discussion among the crowd gradually subsided. Sengoku cleared his throat and said, "I hope you will pay enough attention to this matter. The East Blue is the most peaceful sea in the world. The average bounty for pirates is less than 5 million. But now the bounty on White Knight Gawain has reached 85 million belly. Words are no longer enough to describe his threat. You know, Smoker fought him twice. The first time, He had no weight to deal with a Logia fruit user, but only a few months later, when they fought for the second time, he had already mastered the armament hockey. Such potential can even be compared with those monsters that roam the new world. There was an incredible emotion in Sengoku's voice. You should know that since Roger was executed in Logetown 20 years ago, there has been no strong force in the East Blue for a long time. It is a peaceful sea recognized by the world, and it is also a facade that the Marines and even the world government work hard to maintain. But now, Gawain has directly broken this peace, which is equivalent to giving the world government a slap. The people sitting in the conference room were silent for a while, but their expressions were as black as charcoal. Okainu's expression, which was cold as ice and hard as steel, changed. Accompanied by a sharp burning sound, everyone's eyes gathered on Sengoku's left side. Okainu, who was wearing a military cap, lowered his head, and his specific expression could not be seen clearly. But his voice revealed an unshakable will while speaking. The evil must be strangled in the cradle. I'll go and defeat White Knight Gawain, along with Fire Fist Ace, who just rose in the East Blue. Fire Fist Ace. Hearing the familiar name, Sengoku glanced at Garp without leaving a trace. Seeing the latter's cheeks puffed slightly with his head lowered and said nothing, but the hands under the table were tightly clenched as if he was suppressing his instincts. Sengoku sighed secretly, shook his head, and said, just wait. Kaido is making trouble in the New World again. I heard that this time, he had a head-on conflict with Okaku. You should keep an eye on the things over there. These pirates, known as the Four Emperors, are the opponents that the Marines' highest combat power has to deal with. Okainu nodded and took the task. Sengoku glanced at the crowd and finally set his sights on Zephyr, who had just resigned from the position of chief instructor of the Marine Academy and returned to the front line of the battlefield. This time, Zephyr will go to the East Blue. It's a good opportunity to test the effect of the Battle Smasher. Zephyr raised his hand and pushed his sunglasses, saying lightly, got it. Sengoku responded and reminded, in addition, according to the report obtained by the Marines who explored the scene, the pirate ship that sank to the bottom of the sea was cut off by a sword. White Knight Gawain should have a certain level of accomplishment in swordsmanship. With such strength, a bounty of 85 million is already enough to explain his threat. The specific bounty amount will be finalized today. The actions of the Marine headquarters are much faster than those of the branches. In just 3 days, the news coups from the World Economy News set off from various branches. At this moment, in the New World, under the instruction of the world government, the latest newspapers, together with the latest bounty, are sent to all parts of the world. Hawkeyes, who had just passed Fishman Island, was sitting on a ship made of several logs. The simple raft that can't even be called a pirate ship lets the current carry him to unknown waters. The sea's surface was turbulent, and the weather was unpredictable, but the raft under Hawkeye's feet was as stable as a mountain. A few minutes later, a news COO flew at Hawkeye's raft, threw down a stack of newspapers, took a banknote from Hawkeye's hand, and skillfully put it into the pocket on its chest. Then it flapped its wings and flew away, disappearing on the horizon. This is... Hawkeyes opened the newspaper and saw a familiar yet unfamiliar bounty. Although the photo doesn't match the person, the name is undoubtedly that guy's. After such a tragic defeat, he has risen so quickly. And judging from the bounty, his strength seems to have improved again compared to the day when he challenged me. Looking at the name and the skyrocketing number on the bounty, Hawkeyes is looking forward to Gawain's future more and more. Unlike the unripe fruit in the East Blue, in the near future, Gawain, who has become powerful, will definitely be able to fight him head-on happily without any reservations. Since Red Hair lost an arm, he has been looking forward to such an opponent for too long. Hawkeye's mouth curled up slightly, but his eyes became sharp in the next moment. Just because the sky in the distance was visibly turning dark to the naked eye, the clouds were swirling like a whirlpool, and lightning flashed. The overlapping waves on the sea were as high as 100 meters, and they were pressing towards Hawkeye's with the power to swallow everything. Not to mention the raft under Hawkeye's feet, which was not even a boat, even a Marine's warship, in the face of such a natural disaster, in an instant would be swallowed up and buried in the sea. But Hawkeye's face was full of indescribable excitement. You want to challenge me too? The sword at his back was unsheathed and held in Hawkeye's hand. Boom. He waved lightly, and a light blue flying slash flew out of his hand, directly tearing the incoming waves into pieces. As soon as the waves subsided, the sea accumulated a wave with higher momentum. Hawkeyes showed no fear on his face. He rode the raft under his feet and plunged into the storm. He wanted to take the sea as his enemy. When the storm subsided, Hawkeye's ship had already anchored on a deserted island. The surroundings were full of trees, and it was not long before there were birds flying by, but after seeing the figure on the shore, they scattered away. At this moment, Hawkeyes put the long sword behind him and walked along the beach, but he suddenly heard a familiar voice in his ears. Red hair, who else? Laughter, banquet, drinks, and the familiar red force anchored on the shore. Hawkeye's unconsciously quickened his pace. Hey, Mick, you are here too? Red hair looked at the man in front of him with a little surprise, and then his eyes turned, and he skillfully took out a brand new bounty from his side, like showing off. Do you know? It has increased again. Ha 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 ha. Hawkeyes was slightly stunned and subconsciously said, how do you know that the bounty of the man I value has increased again? The scene was quiet for a while. Everyone looked at Shanks, then at Hawkeyes, with an inexplicable meaning in their eyes. I knew that your relationship was not right. Beckman was immediately attracted by this powerful figure who was not inferior to Shanks, and he couldn't help but recruit him. That. Are you really not considering joining us? After all, this place is closer to the man you value. Hawkeyes raised his eyebrows, noticed the strange looks of the crowd, saw the bounty on Shanks' hand, and then realized that everyone had misunderstood. He quickly took out Gawain's bounty and pointed at the amount on it. It's White Knight Gawain. His bounty has increased again. 248 million. In less than half a year, the bounty has skyrocketed more than 30 times from 8 million. This speed is rare even in the New World. Chapter 100, New Badge. Grand Line. Paradise. Hanafuda looked at the report sent back by his subordinates and the bounty in his hand and felt that his lungs were about to explode. Those two idiots. Going to a place like East Blue to rob a devil fruit, yet they still failed? The more Hanafuda talked, the angrier he became. Boom. He slapped the boulder behind him and flew it away, but the fire in his heart still had nowhere to vent. The boulder fell to the ground, raising clouds of dust, and the pirates, who were completely shocked by the outburst, did not dare to speak for a long time, fearing that they would be affected. After Hanafuda's breath deeply, he barely stabilized his sanity. Seeing this, someone nervously said, this matter is not entirely the fault of those two brothers. Originally, they had obtained the devil fruit, but when they returned to the Grand Line, they were stopped by White Knight Gawain. Besides, White Knight Gawain can easily defeat the two brothers. Such strength is not weak even in the Grand Line. It is highly unlikely that he will eat it immediately. People who already have a certain level of strength, even if they have devil fruit, if they are clear about its ability, they will not eat it. Captain, we still have a chance. Hanafuda showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. What if the devil fruit has already been eaten? I am already a devil fruit user, so it is impossible for me to eat another devil fruit, but this is something that person is interested in. If something goes wrong here, will you take the blame? The pirate who spoke trembled all over and knelt down on the spot. For a moment, he only hated himself for talking too much. Hanafuda glanced at him, gradually calmed down, and said lightly, not everyone is qualified to take the blame. Besides, what you said is right. If there is a slight possibility that the devil fruit is not eaten immediately, then I still have a chance. Whether he eats the devil fruit or not, there is only one way left for him. That is to die. Accompanying his words, a powerful aura emanates from Hanafuda's body, setting off a gust of wind around him. Looking at the surrounding environment and the pirates kneeling in the distance, he felt a sense of suffocation. If I hadn't lost to that kid, how could I have fallen to this point? Damn it. After taking a deep breath, Hanafuda turned his head and looked out the window, only to feel that the sense of crisis that had once made him feel like a thorn in his back had disappeared. Where is that old bastard? He withdrew a few days ago, leaving only a few warships on standby there, posing no threat. Hanafuda showed a cruel smile. That's great, I'll do it myself. East Blue. The wind was light, the waves were gentle, the sky was clear, and the clouds were few. It was rare good weather. A small pirate ship gradually entered Raven Harbor and slowly moored at the side of the harbor under the guidance of the workers. The civilians in the harbor were not surprised by this. It was because the pirate flag on that ship was the one that had pulled this harbor back from the brink of death several times in recent months. There were even many children standing aside and watching curiously. As the gangway was lowered, the Nyaban brothers and Van Augur, who had regained their mobility, together with Jasmine, all gathered here to welcome Gawain's return. Gawain and the others walked down slowly. Miss. Jasmine saw Gaza at a glance, and tears welled up in her eyes when she saw Gaza with torn clothes. Whoa. The two hugged each other tightly and cried in each other's arms. Gawain's sight fell on the two Nyaban brothers, who were crying on the side. He frowned slightly and asked. What happened? Captain, we ate something worth 100 million belly. Sham wanted to cry but had no tears. But she, beside him, burst into tears on the spot. It was Van Augur, who was standing beside them, who waved to Gawain. They accidentally ate devil fruits. It should be the devil fruit eaten by the two people who attacked Raven Harbor. Ah. Gawain had a black question mark on his face. Then he remembered that every devil fruit, especially the zone fruit, has its own consciousness. The most typical example is the Nika fruit, which even evaded the world government's pursuit on its own. It can only be said that the Nayab brothers are most likely to encounter this situation. Gawain threw a probe at the two of them. Name, Sham, potential, bronze, rating, iron, cat fruit, model, ocelot fruit user, name, Butchie, potential, bronze, rating, iron, cat fruit, model, Maine Coon fruit user, as expected. After the two ate the devil fruit, their potential broke through the original upper limit and reached the bronze level. As long as they develop normally, their future combat power will definitely not be weaker than the previous owners of these two devil fruit. Gawain reached out and rubbed their heads, comforting them. Don't be so ungrateful. After eating a devil fruit, if you work hard, your strength will be greatly improved. Just bring a few more lifeguards on the boat when you go out to sea in the future. The two came back to their senses from the depressed mood, reached out, and scratched their heads, revealing a silly smile. Gawain asked, "When did you eat the fruit?" 3 or 4 days ago. That's not right. Latch and Latch died more than 10 days ago. There is still a buffer period for the rebirth of the devil fruit? Gawain frowned. After some thought, Gawain did not find the answer in his memory. He simply stopped thinking about it, turned his eyes to Van Augur beside him, and threw a probe again. Van Augur's panel appeared in front of Gawain. Name, Van Augur, potential, silver, rating, iron, specialized in sniping, have a huge potential, although Van Augur's potential did not reach the gold level as Gawain expected. But Gawain was not surprised. After all, the potential calculated by the system is calculated based on the character's current limit. Once he comprehends hockey or obtains a matching devil fruit, this potential will be directly raised. Besides, even with his current ability, he is more than enough to be a sniper. Gawain slightly raised his head. I have killed those 2 cats. From today on, you are mine. Ah. Although I have never agreed to your bet. However, for the sake of that, the ship distributes dividends according to strength, then please give me more advice. Van Augur pretended to be helpless and said, Captain. Humphrey. Gawain snorted lightly and was about to say something when his sight was attracted by a newspaper falling from the sky. A familiar face in the scattered bounty made Gawain's eyelids jump, and the skyrocketing numbers on it made him feel confused. 1, 10, 100, 10 million. 100 million? 2, 248 million? Nami picked up Gawain's bounty from the ground with shaking arms. The captain's bounty is over 100 million? When Van Augur saw the bounty, he shook his head directly. I just joined a gang, and the captain's bounty is already over 100 million. Is it too late for me to quit now? Kuro glanced at him, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. If you can't even accept this bounty, then you have to be mentally prepared for the journey ahead of time. What do you think? That guy. He must become the king of the pirates. The Nayab brothers were so excited that they started dancing awkwardly on the spot. The captain's bounty has increased again. Everyone was excited when they saw Gawain's skyrocketing bounty because the bounty could reflect, to a great extent, the strength of a pirate. And just in terms of bounty, Gawain has opened up 1 or even 2 zeros for most of the pirates in the East Blue. Only Gawain, who was surrounded by everyone, was a little dazed for a while because the familiar system prompt sound came again, and he knew what this meant. Congratulations on unlocking the badge, a bounty of over 100 million. You will be favored by the sea. Chapter 101, God Fruit. It can offset the curse of the sea. Offset? The curse? Gawain's eyes lit up. He naturally knew what this meant. In the One Piece world, what else can be the thing most associated with the curse besides the devil fruit? Once someone eats a devil fruit, they will be cursed by the sea, not to mention losing the ability to swim. They will even be restrained by the sea prism stone. But even in this situation, countless pirates and marines still seek all kinds of devil fruits. The reason is that the various abilities provided by the devil fruit are too powerful, and the impact on a person's combat power and potential can be said to be immediate. The best example is the Nayab brothers, who are standing in front of Gawain at this moment, looking at the bounty with a silly smile on their faces. Originally, the potential of these two people was only at the iron level, which was stronger than the ordinary pirates under Gawain's command, but it was also extremely limited. Whether in terms of combat power or potential, they could not match the several cadres on the ship. But after eating the devil fruit, the potential of these two people was directly upgraded to a higher level, reaching the same bronze level as Jin, which can almost be said to be a qualitative change. Moreover, what these two people ate was only the most common zone fruit among the devil fruit. Suppose it is Logia or a mythical zone fruit. In that case, it is not impossible to directly raise their potential to silver or even gold level, which can be said to be a great improvement in one's own potential and immediate combat power. This badge can help me completely offset the side effects of the devil fruit. In other words, if I eat a devil fruit now, it will be pure profit. Even Gawain couldn't help but get excited. According to Gawain's own prediction, if he can eat the right devil fruit and get familiar with the ability, his immediate combat power is likely to soar directly to the gold level. And it's not impossible for his potential to likely reach the diamond level. That's the potential that is almost the highest in the world. Even if he doesn't awaken the conqueror Haki when he realizes all his potential. In the diamond rank, he's probably the weakest among all the strong ones. If any one of them is picked out alone, the Marines and even the world government will have to treat it with caution. Besides, speaking of rare devil fruit, Gawain has one in his hand now, the one that Gaza gave him. Gawain could no longer hold back, looked at Gaza, and said, "What type of devil fruit did you give me before?" Gaza put down the bounty in her hand, shook her head, and said, "Even the latest devil fruit encyclopedia has not recorded it." Then she seemed to think of something and smiled, "But when I was looking up the devil fruit, I heard a rumor that the world government deliberately hid the existence of certain devil fruits. It's because those devil fruit users have caused extremely terrible harm in history, and some even caused the disappearance of several kingdoms and the extinction of life. In the history of some, they even called those god fruit. The one I gave you may be one of them. Is that so?" Gawain frowned slightly. "Perhaps it means that the probability is not 100%. Even with the badge to offset the side effects of the devil fruit, Gawain can only eat one devil fruit in his life." At least before confirming the true information of the devil fruit, Gawain forced himself to suppress the throbbing in his heart. "Do you have other versions of the devil fruit encyclopedia?" "It's on the way." "Okay, give it to me when you get it." Gaza nodded repeatedly. Kuro, who was standing by, saw the emotions that Gawain was having trouble hiding at the moment and couldn't help but remind him, "It's still unknown whether this devil fruit is strong or weak, but the side effects are equally strong. With me here, you can reach the top no matter what." After seeing the abilities of the Naib brothers and knowing the side effects of the devil fruit, Kuro lost all interest in it. After all, who would be willing to take the risk of eating that kind of thing? Gawain nodded, "I know. Just keep it in mind." Seeing this, Kuro stopped talking. A few minutes later, the people who gathered in the harbor gradually walked towards the central area. Gawain and his companions were temporarily arranged in a building next to the city lord's mansion. They felt at ease living here. Now that Gaza has joined Gawain's pirate crew, this harbor has naturally become under Gawain's sphere of influence. Besides, for Gawain, the most important thing at the moment is to figure out the true information of the devil fruit in his hand. Time flies, and 3 days have passed. Gaza, who returned to the harbor, took over the affairs of the harbor again. With the issuance of orders, the harbor gradually regained its former vitality. In just a few months, it was attacked by pirates twice in succession. Now, some buildings still have traces of charred bombardment. In the Lord's mansion. "Miss." Accompanied by a cheerful sound, Jasmine pushed open the door of Gaza's office and piled several devil fruit encyclopedias in her arms in the office. "Here are the devil fruit encyclopedia of various versions that we have collected. This one is even a version from more than 100 years ago. There must be the devil fruit that we have never seen before." Jasmine put one of the books in front of Gaza. Gaza lowered her head. On the table, she saw a devil fruit encyclopedia whose cover had completely changed color, and the paper was smoky yellow. She opened it casually and turned the pages one by one. She compared the devil fruit recorded in this encyclopedia with the image in her memory, then she shook her head and turned to the next one, and so on. "I'll help you too." Jasmine smiled sweetly and then took out an illustrated book and began to look at it carefully. For a moment, the only sound in the office was the rustling of papers until a familiar picture appeared on the devil fruit encyclopedia in front of Gaza. "Mythical zone. Devil fruit. Found it. That is the devil fruit we gave to Mr. Gawain." Gaza exclaimed and turned the worn-out illustrated book to the last page, only to see a familiar devil fruit here. But the record below the fruit made Gaza's breath pause slightly. "The immortal evil god who made the earth dry up, life wither, and everything enter the realm of death. Once a country turned into a desert and became a forbidden area for living things. Every few hundred years, it will reappear on this sea, looking for its destined host. Hey, isn't his a bit too much?" Jasmine turned her head to look at the illustrated book in Gaza's hand and curled her lips. The handwriting here was obviously added later, and the original version should not be like this. Maybe it was a prank by a later person. Jasmine pointed to the place where the devil fruit information was recorded. The handwriting there is obviously different from the printed text in other places, and even the notes are very sloppy. Gaza took a look and ignored it, Maybe. But Mr. Gawain should not be in a hurry. Chapter 102, Mythical Zone. On the other side, on the mountain behind Raven Harbor. The surrounding area is rocky, and you can see the sea when you look up, with waves crashing against the shore and rolling up pure white water. Ha! Nami waved the bamboo sword in her hand. Her movements and eyes had some faint shadows of a swordsman. Gawain nodded secretly. Nami's talent is a bit higher than he expected. Although she still can't break through the potential limit of iron, if she can keep improving at this speed, she may be able to reach his level when he just transmigrated to this world. If it is just for self-protection, this level is enough for the navigator, who is basically in the rear and protected in the center. After all, if the opponent has already broken through to the position of the navigator and other logistics personnel, this battle is basically lost. Seeing that Nami's practice is on the right track, Gawain is ready to turn around and leave, looking for a place to start his own training. He just took a step and stopped the next moment because a beautiful figure walked quickly in the distance. Mr. Gawain, I know the true face of that devil fruit. Hearing Gaz's voice, Gawain's mouth curled up. If he wants to say what he is most looking forward to during this period, it is the existence of the devil fruit in his hand. Now, he finally has the answer. He subconsciously quickened his pace. Just as he walked in front of Gaza, the latter handed him a book that looked a bit old. The page she opened was a hand-painted devil fruit picture. Although the book is old and the color of the picture has faded, the strange fruit covered with thorns and two curved corners at the fruit stem still made Gawain recognize it at a glance. This is the devil fruit in his hand. Then Gawain slowly read out the name of the fruit, Mythical Zone. Dragon fruit, model, red dragon. Dragon? And Gawain looked down and also saw the record added by the later ones. Unlike Gaza and the others, who regarded this as a prank by the later ones, when he saw this record, he inexplicably had a kind of intuition. This is not a prank. It's a warning. Immortal evil god. However, the dragon is called a god? Unlike Nika, which symbolizes the sun god, this devil fruit does not symbolize a certain god in itself but is called this because of its overly violent ability. In just a moment, Gawain made such a judgment in his mind, which made him more determined that this was the most suitable devil fruit for him. The devil fruit chooses its owner. You fall into my hands. This is our fate. It is you. Thinking of this, Gawain did not care about practicing armament hockey, and his figure disappeared in front of the two women. In just a few minutes, Gawain returned to his room and took out the devil fruit placed in the treasure chest from the table. He checked it again with the record in the devil fruit encyclopedia. After confirming that it was correct, he opened his mouth and took a bite. Spicy. When the first bite of the fruit flesh entered his mouth, Gawain's face turned red visibly, and every cell in his mouth felt a burning pain. He felt a ball of magma flowing from his mouth into his stomach. He drank a lot of water in succession before he could barely relieve it. The next moment, Gawain's body began to expand at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a few seconds, he completely burst the room he was in. And this is just the beginning. Red scales spread all over his body, his originally brown pupils turned into light gold, and a pair of curved horns stretched from his forehead to the back of his head. When the change stopped, a red dragon with a shoulder height of nearly 30 meters and a total length of nearly 100 meters stood in the ruined building. In the harbor, there were bursts of screams, and countless civilians were directly scared silly by the giant beast in front of them and fled in all directions. Even the cargo ships that had just entered the harbor did not hesitate when they saw the giant dragon standing in the center of the harbor. They were afraid that if they were a step slower, they would be swallowed by the giant beast in front of them. Dragon. The guards who rushed to the harbor looked at the huge monster in front of them, hesitating for a long time, and finally uttered only one word, which could express their fear at this moment. Bang. They could not find any reason to describe their shock, and their trembling legs showed how much fear they had at this time. Kuro, who was covered in dust, looked at the sword in his hand and then looked at the red dragon in the distance. In his mind, he was already planning how to escape in order to minimize the loss. But at this moment, a familiar voice came to his ears. It's me. Gawain. Kuro subconsciously turned his head to look at the giant beast in the distance. He was so horrified, and he felt that the scene in front of him was extremely absurd. For a moment, he didn't even notice that the glasses on his nose had slipped off. Gawain? Your appearance. Suddenly, Kuro thought of something, and his pupils shrank suddenly. Devil fruit? Is this the devil fruit that Gaza gave you? After speaking, Kuro turned his head and looked at the Nayab brothers, who had also stood up from the ruins and had transformed into human beast form. Compared with the giant beast in front of him, the two cat men who were more than 4 meters tall after transformation were as well behaved as domestic cats. No, the size difference between domestic cats and humans is not that big. In front of Gawain at this moment, The size of the Nyaban brothers is not even that of a kitten. It's really outrageous. Besides, since it's mythical zone, if it is as the legend says, then Gawain should also have the ability to spit fire, lightning, or frost. Compared to Gawain, the Nyaban brothers, they are really just cats. You told me that you ate the same thing? Are you kidding me? Kuro was immediately defeated. The opponent is really flying a dragon, how can he fight? You tell me how to fight it. Gawain, who has just gained the ability and cannot control it perfectly, has to temporarily maintain the beast form. Even if they are both human, there are differences in talent due to innate endowments, not to mention the various strange and varied devil fruits. Besides, the mythical zone still has special abilities. After speaking, Gawain looked around, thinking of the information about the red dragon's ability in his mind. He gave up the idea of using it here. It was because the aftermath it caused was too terrifying. If he used it here, the entire harbor would turn into a desert. He turned to look at Kuro. What do you think? Do you want to consider it? Just one bite and it will give you the purest power. Kuro's face darkened. I told you. Who would eat that kind of thing? Jin, who had just come from the training ground and heard the conversation between the two, turned his head slightly and glanced at Kuro. Gawain looked at the two and said, all right. I'll try out the ability I just got. You guys take care of the things in the harbor first. Kuro responded unhappily, but his eyes were attracted by a tattered devil fruit encyclopedia in the corner. I'll just take a look. It shouldn't count as breaking my words, right? Chapter 103, Dragon Breath East Blue. A pirate ship is sailing against the wind and waves. The one-eyed pirate captain with a golden hook in the left hand is standing on the deck, holding a telescope in one hand and a sea chart in the other. After getting familiar with it, he confirms whether the fleet has deviated from the target. After a moment, the one-eyed pirate nodded with a hideous smile on his face. Yes, Raven Harbor is in this direction. You know, it is one of the richest ports in the East Blue, and there are no less than hundreds of merchant ships passing through there every day. As long as we take it, we will have endless money in the future. I even heard that the lord there is extremely beautiful, and I just happen to be short of a wife. He couldn't help but start to imagine his happy life in the future. Only the first mate beside him showed an expression of wanting to say something. Captain, the information we got was a long time ago, maybe there have been changes there. After all, this is the territory of White Knight pirates. The one-eyed pirate did not care at all and said lightly, the ones who attacked them were monsters from the Grand Line. When I was young, I sailed there for a while, it was simply. The one-eyed pirate had a look of fear on his face, but he just made it up. Because those memories he was talking about were completely non-existent. In the distance, a huge red monster flapped its wings and rushed close to the sea. Dragon! Someone shouted in surprise, and everyone reacted and hurriedly looked for cover, but unfortunately, their actions were one step too late. Gawain, who turned into a dragon, flew over the pirate ship. The airflow caused by the high-speed flight alone caused the one-eyed pirate to die and the pirate ship under his feet to be destroyed. With several sea beasts jumping out of the water, everything returned to calm. Half an hour later, on an uninhabited desert island in the East Blue, a dragon hovered in the sky while its pale golden eyes scanned around. After confirming that there were no signs of living people, Gawain slowly landed on the open space in the center of the desert island. Countless birds and beasts were frightened away, and some timid ones even dived into the sea just because the dragon standing in the center of the island had a breath that made them extremely afraid. Here, I can almost truly test my devil fruit ability and why it is called Immortal Evil God. As his voice fell to the ground, Gawain slowly descended, and his claws grasped the ground so tightly that they were directly embedded in the rock layer on the surface. With Gawain as the center, the surrounding forests began to dry up at a speed visible to the naked eye as all their vitality was sucked away. Blue, fluorescent breaths flowed along Gawain's limbs, gradually converging into the beating heart in his body and then flowing through Gawain's limbs and bones along with blood. Bang! 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 With every heartbeat, Gawain felt that his strength had increased. He finally stopped his action when Gawain felt a burst of pain in his heart and blood vessels. At this moment, he finally had a real understanding of the record he had seen in the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia before. The red dragon can extract vitality from the ground to replenish its own physical strength, accelerate the healing of wounds, and at the same time accumulate power in the body to release dragon breath. It can be said that unless it can be killed instantly with one strike, as long as the surrounding energy is sufficient, the red dragon is a war machine that will not die or get tired. But excessive vitality extraction will eventually lead to a scene like this in front of me. He looked around. At this moment, the deserted island, with his position as the center, the trees, flowers, and plants within a few kilometers around him have completely died, and even the ground is gradually turning into signs of desertification. Is it because of this that it's called Immortal Evil God? After saying that, Gawain flapped his wings behind him, and in the blink of an eye, he climbed high into the sky and stared at the island below. The next moment, the vitality that had just been extracted gathered crazily into Gawain's mouth. It was so much that even if he closed his mouth, there was blue light overflowing from his teeth. But when Gawain opened his mouth, he only spit out a blue crystal the size of a water droplet. The crystal fell rapidly from the sky and finally exploded the moment it touched the ground. Boom. The sound was enough to shake the world, accompanied by a mushroom cloud that rose straight into heaven, raising dust all over the sky. After a few seconds, the smoke and dust finally dissipated. On the deserted island below, the surrounding mountains were flattened, and a huge pit with a diameter of 100 meters was located in the center. After doing all this, Gawain was exhausted and slowly fell to the ground while admiring his own work. This is what I did when I was not fully familiar with my devil fruit. When I fully master it, I will be able to do more. And the potential of this devil fruit is definitely not weaker than, or even superior to, Kaido's azure dragon. The vitality of the earth can be extracted, and the sea. A few minutes later, Gawain floated up from the seawater and had already returned to his human form. The favor of the sea has been used to offset the curse of the devil fruit. He can swim at the sea and was not weakened by it, so he should not be also weakened by the sea prism stone either. But it is obvious that his ability is still insufficient, so don't think about using his ability in the seawater for the time being. Gawain called up the system panel, and his eyes fell on the 3 badges. After a careful look, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. The name has nothing to do with the ability. It is even obviously a badge from the same series, but the ability is completely unrelated. However, has my potential reached the diamond level as I expected? The combat power is still a little short, but after I get familiar with the devil fruit ability, it should be almost gold. This time, it's a big profit. I may be a little timid in the new world, but I can almost walk sideways in the 4 seas and paradise unless an old guy from the new world comes to hunt a small fish like me. But this kind of thing can't happen to me every time, right? After that, Gawain activated his ability again and tried several times before he successfully transformed into a red dragon and flew away. At the same time, in Raven Harbor, Gaza was leading the guards and workers to clean up the mess. Then she noticed that the oldest devil fruit encyclopedia, which she had spent a lot of money on, was lying in Kuro's hand. Jasmine, who was standing beside her, said bluntly, "Mr. Kuro, you don't like devil fruits, right?" Kuro's old face flushed. "Know your enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles, you will never be defeated. There's nothing wrong with knowing your opponent's ability in advance." As he said that, he was about to return the encyclopedia in his hand to Gaza. But his left hand took advantage of the 2 people's unpreparedness to tear off the page he had just read and put it in his pocket. Chapter 104, Rumbleball. Kuro's obviously unnatural movements naturally can't be hidden from Gaza, and she unconsciously smiles at the corner of her mouth. "Wow, you are still stubborn. You are obviously tempted to eat devil fruit very much." Looking at Kuro in front of her, Gaza almost couldn't help laughing out loud. She took a lot of effort to calm down and said, "Mr. Kuro, since the matter here has been settled, I will also return." Well, she almost couldn't help but laugh while speaking. "If you like this book, I have who would like that kind of thing." Kuro blushed. "I study history." As soon as his voice fell, Jasmine beside Gaza laughed out loud. "Ha ha ha." Gaza quickly covers Jasmine's mouth. Then she turned around and was about to explain a few words, but she saw that Kuro had disappeared. The master and servant saw this, and the corners of their mouths curled up slightly, and a burst of unbridled laughter came from the harbor. At night, the sky was dotted with stars, and the bright moon was pure white. On the sea not far away from Raven Harbor, a dragon let out a roar. In a few seconds, it flew over the harbor and landed steadily on the mountain behind. With Gaza's orders and reminders, the guards in the harbor were much calmer this time and did not launch an attack. But when the dragon flew over their heads, some people still couldn't help but squat and curl up in the corner. That's the most common reaction for this mythical beast that only exists in legends. Boom. After a loud noise, Gawain folded his wings and landed slowly. His body began to shrink visibly, and in just a few seconds, he turned back into human form. Looking at the huge footprints on the side, Gawain's mood was still difficult to calm down. I can basically control the 3 most basic forms, namely human form, human beast form, and beast form. The red dragon is very strong, even more powerful than I imagined. The strong physique of the red dragon, combined with the characteristics of extracting the earth's vitality, is almost a monster that combines endurance, burst, damage resistance, and large-scale AO. But Gawain frowned slightly, looked down at the sword in his hand, and was stunned for a few seconds before continuing. The Red Dragon really is not compatible with my current combat style of combining the pussyfoot maneuver and swordsmanship with a fast face-to-face attack. It is an independent combat system. And to maximize my devil fruit, the only way is to perfectly combine it with my own combat style. The best example in this regard is Kaido the Beast. The ultimate hockey, the innate strong physique of the honest tribe, plus the exaggerated increase brought to it by the Azure Dragon Fruit, the perfect combination of the three has created the king of single combat second to none in this era. In the future, when Luffy fights Kaido, he has to rely on the 9 red scabbards and the rebellious Yamato to consume Kaido, and even with that, he was on the verge of death several times before he could barely win. If it really comes to a one-on-one duel in full strength, I can only say that his life and death situation will be completely predictable. If Kaido is used as a template. Gawain closed his eyes and pondered. After half an hour, he opened his eyes again. A prop, or potion, appeared before his eyes. Rumble Ball. A drug that distorts the wavelength of the user's devil fruit-enhanced biochemistry. It was developed by Tony Chopper, the human fruit user, to expand his upper limit. If it is not necessary, Gawain certainly has no intention of taking drugs in battle. The key is the existence of the Rumble Ball, which proves the degree of transformation of the zone-type devil fruit can be controlled. As long as he can understand this principle. With his ability to fully control his body, he will soon be able to fully master it. At that time, he will be able to transform part of his body, or several parts, into beast form while retaining his agility advantage, allowing him to maximize Red Dragon Fruit. For example, he can cover the surface of his body with a layer of scales to improve his defense, strengthen his own muscles alone to gain the strength of the Red Dragon, or spread his wings behind him to gain the ability to fly. In this way, while having the physical ability of the Red Dragon, his fighting style will also become more flexible. As long as he combines it with his swordsmanship and develops corresponding tactics, he can push his own combat power to a more exaggerated level. Back to the perfect combination of physique, swordsmanship, devil fruit, and hockey. At that time, defeating Kaido in a head-on, one-on-one battle would not have been a problem. As long as the battlefield is not chosen in a desert or sea where the Earth's vitality is almost exhausted, the exaggerated endurance of the Red Dragon would allow him to maintain peak conditions throughout the battle. Thinking of this, the best situation is a protracted war. Just right. Gawain's mouth curled up with a smile unconsciously. I need a professional ship doctor on my ship, and in this regard, Chopper may not be the best, but he is definitely the most cost-effective. With a bounty of a few hundred belly, he is fighting against those with hundreds of millions belly, and his main job is even a doctor. In the past, Gawain would definitely say, the bounty is only a few $100s, what are you playing with? After the pirate ship is built, the first stop after entering the Grand Line has a specific destination. After speaking, Gawain was slightly stunned, and then he realized that if he took in Chopper, the crew members who originally belonged to the Straw Hat Pirates would have nearly half of them taken in by himself. Gawain had no psychological burden at all. Besides, the reindeer was simple and kind, had strong professional skills, and could be used as reserve food at critical moments. Gawain was also quite interested. Straw Hat. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being born late. I don't know what kind of crew you will gather after you go out to sea this time. TSK. After shaking his head, Gawain turned around and walked towards the harbor. In the distance, the lights were bright, and the people passing by were walking shoulder to shoulder. Although there are still many buildings that are still being rebuilt, the faces of these civilians are full of hopeful smiles. He can say that despite suffering 2 pirate attacks, this is still one of the most prosperous areas in East Blue. There are no pirates who dare to make trouble here. As long as Gawain's flag is still standing around Raven Harbor and the White Knight pirates are still active in this area, this sea area will not be disturbed by the pirates. Especially after the news that Lebu and Latch from the Grand Line were killed by Gawain spread, it was even more so. As for the issue of pirate activities in the harbor, once they take down the pirate flag, who can say that they are not a good citizen? That's it. Besides, who among the harbor lords or kingdom nobles of this area doesn't have a part-time job? You know, they are pursued by most pirates. Pirates can occupy the mountains and be kings, so why can't kingdom nobles go to sea? For a period of time, Gawain took Kuro and a few others and simply stayed in Raven Harbor. Even Zoro, Sanji, and Django, who stayed on Pala Island, came over. After all, although Pala Island is their base camp, it is not as prosperous as Raven Harbor. Seeing this, Gaza simply allocated a piece of land to Gawain behind the harbor and even wanted to allocate a sum of money from the treasury to help the White Knight pirates build a residence. Unfortunately, all this was interrupted by a sad face. Miss, we have no money. Chapter 105, Sponsorship fees. Jasmine showed a mournful expression on her face and handed a financial report to Gaza with trembling fingers. After a brief glance, the latter also breathed deeply, suffering 2 attacks in succession. Our money has basically been used for disaster relief and harbor reconstruction. We have already spent most of our money. If this continues, I'm afraid even the shipyard will be delayed. No. At the shipyard, there cannot be any mistakes regarding Mr. Gawain's plan to enter the Grand Line. Gaza frowned. Has the payment owed by the royal family of the Kingdom of Goa not yet been settled? When the Kingdom of Goa was mentioned, not only Gaza's face turned livid, but even Jasmine on the side showed an unhappy expression. There have been too many things going on in the harbor in the past few months, and we don't have time to pay attention to the affairs of the Kingdom of Goa. But before that, all the people we sent were kicked out by them, and even a few workers were imprisoned at will. It took me a lot of effort just to fish them out. Jasmine gritted her teeth and said, how do we expect them to pay back? Gaza sighed and said, let's send someone to try it again. Miss. Jasmine's face fell, but seeing the tiredness on Gaza's face, she immediately changed her words. Forget it, I'll let someone try again. Gaza nodded, but in her heart, she had no expectations for this. She still knew what kind of person the royal family of the Kingdom of Goa was. Their position itself is not correct. After the death of the old king, the legitimate princes died one after another, but the last one who succeeded him was someone who had no blood connection with the royal family. If there is nothing fishy in this, it can only be said to be a lie. But after all, the other party is a member of the world government, and it involves too much, and Gaza is also a little wary. Gaza still had no clue, so she waved to Jasmine to go down and rest early while she looked at the financial report in her hand. It wasn't until dawn that she suddenly remembered something. The first martial arts tournament. Didn't Mr. Gawain plan to hold a fair duel within the ship? If this matter can be normalized and even open to contestants to compete together, we will definitely be able to attract more tourists from all walks of life to Raven Harbor to revitalize it. Direct ticket revenue is secondary, but more importantly, it can directly benefit surrounding businesses through this method. Gaza felt that something the more she thought about it. Regardless of her physical fatigue, she stood up, opened the door, and walked towards Gawain's residence. After a few minutes, at the edge of Raven Harbor, Gawain and Kuro sit in the tavern while listening as Gaza tells her plans, commonly known as painted cakes, and possible subsequent benefits. Just when Gaza was talking about it, she was interrupted by Kuro. Such a grand plan requires a lot of investment in the early stage, right? Gaza's face turned red, she looked at Gawain as if asking for help and said urgently. Mr. Gawain, as long as this thing is done well, it will be a business that is sure to make money without losing money. After that, Raven Harbor will be revitalized. At that time, our profits will only get higher and higher. Gawain looked at Gaza and said, Raven Harbor is short of money right now. Gaza was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect that Gawain could see through her embarrassment at this moment. She could only nod helplessly. 2 consecutive attacks have consumed almost all the cash in Raven Harbor, and the debt owed by the Kingdom of Goa has also not been repaid. The king even acted like a douchebag. If this continues, let alone the harbor being unable to operate normally, even your shipbuilding plan will be affected. Gawain suddenly sat up straight and frowned slightly. This plan of yours takes too long. By the time it actually generates profits, your capital chain will have been broken. If the gap is not big, we can help you fill it temporarily. Kuro sighed and said, we need to reserve enough funds for shipbuilding. Besides, Captain, you spent a lot of money to place those wounded companions before. There isn't much left now, and there will only be more places to spend money in the future. As he spoke, Kuro's voice paused slightly, and a flash of light suddenly flashed in his mind. It is not impossible unless a large amount of funds can be withdrawn in a short period of time. You want to open peripheral betting? Gawain frowned, but Kuro shook his head directly and turned to him with a mysterious smile. There is no pirate that can compete with me or Jin. Captain, we are now the undisputed overlord of the East Blue. Not to mention those who can compete with you, even those who can are very few. Besides, how much money do you expect we can get from those poor gamblers? If we want to make money, we can make big money from rich people. Gawain tapped his fingertips lightly on the table, making a clicking sound. After just a few breaths, he could clearly see Kuro's plan. Are you planning to attack the nobles in East Blue? What? This time, we are doing serious business. Kuro stretched out his hand to push up his glasses, but the smile at the corner of his mouth became more ferocious. We are holding such a big event, so it's not too much to charge some sponsorship fees, right? It's not too much to ask them to give us some money, right? Hiss. Gawain gasped. This is not collecting sponsorship fees. It is planning to take advantage of the martial arts competition to directly bring down the nobles of East Blue from top to bottom. This bastard really doesn't want to be a human being. This isn't good. Gawain rubbed his hands. Kuro glanced at him sideways. Why? You don't want to do it, Captain? That's not to say, I'm just worried that we can only cut one crop of leeks. Then we should be softer the first time. The two looked at each other and smiled. He can only say that he understands what kind of virtues a noble in the world of One Piece has. Gawain didn't feel the slightest burden of cutting flesh from these people. Gaza was confused when she heard this, but she already understood that Gawain and Kuro had agreed to her request. There was just one thing she didn't understand, so she couldn't help but ask, if we want to sponsor, will they give it to us? Of course they will. Because I'm going to let Jin and Kuro take the boat to ask for it. If they don't give it to me, I'll change it to the pirate flag and ask for it again. Gawain nodded. They will understand it. Gaza understood what Gawain meant. Thinking of a debt owed by the kingdom of Goa, Gaza felt heartbroken. She gritted her teeth and said, Captain, can we start with the kingdom of Goa first? No problem. Chapter 106, Martial Arts Tournament. The three of them put their heads together and began to discuss the details. Only half an hour later, the general process of this martial arts tournament was finalized. The martial arts tournament that was originally supposed to be held within the ship was changed to be held publicly in East Blue. Gawain directly copied the process of bullfighting in Dressrosa. He would set up 4 major arenas and start a battle royal. The 4 people who stand at the end of each arena will advance to the top 16 and then face off against each other. The winner will advance to compete for the championship. In the first martial arts tournament, all the members of the White Knight Pirate who were willing to participate would join, and at the same time, other people were accepted to register, which was also a model for the subsequent annual events. After this session, the general ranking of the White Knight Pirate was determined. If new members join, they will start challenging others from the lowest rankings step by step. The final winner of the martial arts tournament will leave their name in the Hall of Fame and obtain a bonus and other rare treasures. As for the prizes, the auction house in Logtown often sells famous swords or devil fruits. But because it is the execution site of King of the Pirates, many pirates make trouble there every day. If someone carries a lot of cash and doesn't have a certain strength, it is easy to be targeted. The next auction should be in half a month. After saying that, Gaza blinked and looked at Gawain. The meaning couldn't be more obvious. Gawain smiled bitterly and shook his head. I can transfer some money to you first so that... Never mind, I'll go to Logtown myself. Gaza nodded vigorously. The affairs in the harbor cannot be separated from you. I'm the only one who can handle that bastard who plays with cigarettes. Gawain then conveyed the adjustments to the martial arts tournament to his crew. Those who are satisfied can participate in the internal ranking battle to improve their own ranking. The ranking within the pirate crew will be arranged according to the results of this martial arts tournament. If there is any person unsatisfied, they can challenge him. In the meeting room, after listening to Gawain's story, Sanji's eyes were shining. If I win, my heroic appearance will be seen by everyone. That means I will have a bigger stage this time, even facing all the civilians and nobles in the East Blue. When the time comes. Sanji's nostrils were visibly enlarged, and his hands even made an indescribable curve. Idiot. Nami, who was standing shoulder to shoulder with him, punched Sanji on the head and knocked him to the ground. Bang. Sanji's head was visibly bulging, and it was even steaming. Zoro glanced at the two of them, curled his lips at Sanji, and ignored him. His attention was completely attracted by what Gawain said, an open martial arts tournament? The whole East Blue, no, it might even attract monsters from the Grand Line. To fight against such a strong man, I'm afraid my current strength is not enough. It seems that I can't slack off in the next 3 months. Nami glanced at Zoro inconspicuously and muttered, if you want to keep training,